Principals and Instructional Improvement Committee for June 11th, 2024. Could we have a roll call?
Mr. Appel.
Here.
Dr. Armstrong. Mr. Birkin. Mr. Castile. Mr. Castile is not present. Ms. Champagne. Dr. Clark. Mr. Harris. Mr. Hollis. Ms. Holloway. Ms. Mellering. Mr. Morris. And Ms. Morgan. We have a quorum.
Thank you. You want to read the first one?
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding items 4.1 through 4.3. Motion?
We need a motion to accept the consent agenda. Ms. Simone. And a second.
Armstrong.
Dr. Armstrong. Okay. Any objections to accepting it? No objections heard. We'll go to the next item. I think at this time I would recognize Mr. Morris for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we take item 5.1 out of order.
We have a motion to take 5.1 out of order. Dr. Armstrong seconds.
Okay. So your first item is going to be on page 125, item 5.1, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 111, the Louisiana School District and State Accountability System regarding the K-12 accountability system. The recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent revisions to Bulletin 111, and updated backup has been distributed.
Okay. I think I'll recognize Mr. Morris for a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to amend the motion to include the following. Section 1711 shall be submitted as a notice of intent to align with the final status of HB 762 of the 2024 regular legislative session, and direct Bessie direct LDOE to prepare and submit the appropriate revisions to the Louisiana ESSA state plan.
We have a second from Ms. Champagne. Would you like to explain that a little bit, Dr. Brumley?
Yes, sir. So the shift from the original motion is just because a particular bill passed its way through the legislature, and at this point in time, we're still waiting to determine if that bill will go into effect, into law, or rather the governor will veto that particular bill. And so I've previously communicated to the board the impacts one way or the other. And what this does is we go ahead and approve policy. You see how that impacts, and then we would submit the final copy that aligns to rather that bill goes into effect or it's vetoed. And so that's how that would work. Mr. Appel, I want to thank you for the opportunity to give just a few brief remarks. Back in January, the board unanimously motioned for us to bring to you a revised accountability formula. You asked us to consider things such as rigor, simplicity, transparency, the definition of career and college readiness. You asked us to make sure that we engage the public. You asked us to make sure that we did an online survey. We did an online survey, and we got about 8,000 responses. I would share a couple of the things that I felt were interesting. So, for instance, one of the questions on the survey said, Louisiana's graduates are very prepared to compete in today's global economy. While educational employees, 66% of educational employees believe that that was important and true. Only about 50% of students and communities felt the same. So I thought that was a bit interesting. Also, whenever we looked overall, there was a really strong emphasis on students being literate and numerate as a significant factor in determining school quality. And then there was really strong indicators that student growth should be important, but also simple for practitioners and leaders to calculate. So those are a few of the comments I found interesting from the 8,000 responses we received. We also brought this plan to the state's Accountability Council, which is the group of individuals tasked with reviewing shifts to your accountability proposal. At that particular meeting, that passed and was endorsed by a vote of 12-2 by the Accountability Council. We have had numerous meetings with leadership from the Superintendent's Association where board leadership has worked with them, and they have engaged well. We also brought this plan to the Superintendent's Advisory Council where they did oppose the plan, and I'm sure they'll tell you more about that as we work through the morning. But we do feel like we have a strong plan for you today. We do think that it raises the bar for schools in the state of Louisiana so that we can compete globally. We think with the emphasis on proficiency, on growth, on making sure that students are graduating career, college, or service ready, it's going to be a game changer for the state of Louisiana. I've told you as a board for at least 6 months now that accountability changes are one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult thing that this board can do, because they are so sensitive. And I get that, and I understand that, and I appreciate that. And I don't know of anyone who's going to be completely satisfied with any proposal brought forward. But it is working that we have worked earnestly to try to get to this place today. So I just run briefly through this presentation, much faster than you've probably seen it before, but I do feel like for public interest, we need to at least share the presentation in this meeting. So the reason that it's important to have an accountability system, one, is to improve student achievement and to provide the public with an accurate assessment of school quality and performance. Whenever we were developing this plan, there were 3 fundamental pillars that were really important for us. And so those drivers were setting high expectations with the plan, having a plan that was simple and transparent, and that really considered the Board of Regents and BESI's shared definition around career and college readiness. We wanted to set high expectations, and so we looked at ways in which we could ensure that more students are growing year over year, that more students are hitting that proficiency mark, which we have identified as mastery for several years in the state of Louisiana, and that these students can thrive beyond the high school experience. So in terms of simple and transparent, we are moving away from a complicated formula of various point factors and values for different things. I understand, and I've heard the comments, that sure, as we have simplified a system, some nuance is lost. I'm not arguing with that. But we are moving from assigning various values to simply what % of the school students met the mark, what % are proficient in reading, what % graduated high school, what % are graduating ready to accelerate into career, college, or service. So as a reminder, the Board of Regents and BESI thankfully adopted a shared definition of readiness. So on the university pathway, students are graduating from high school prepared, and they do not need remediation or co-requisite support when they leave high school. For students on that career pathway, they're graduating prepared for employment with foundational skills required to enter into those career pathways. So the first measure is grow. We have spent over a year looking at various growth models from across the country. And so we are adopting, or we are proposing a model that is very simple. We take the first 3 of the 5 achievement levels where our students can score on their standardized assessments, and we cut them in half. And we say every student over the course of a given year has to move at least a half of an achievement level. So for instance, if a student comes into the grade and they're a low approaching basic, the expectation is by the end of the year, they're at a high approaching basic or greater. Students on that mastery, whenever they're already coming in, mastering content, they have to move 1 scale score point because we believe it's still important for those students to move. And students who come in at advanced simply have to remain at advanced. The theory behind that is if we take a 3rd grade student that scores the absolute lowest level of achievement in the 3rd grade, if they improve simply a half of an achievement level year over year, by the time that student exits 9th grade and starts to work on more of the career and college readiness expectations that are included in the high school formula, they are at mastery in terms of their content level understanding. They're proficient and have the ability to read and do math on grade level. So in terms of how we will judge growth, it's pretty simple. We're going to look at the percentage of students who are growing in math, in English. We're going to identify for every school in the state the bottom 25% of achievers in that school, ensure that educators on that campus know who those students are, work with schools so that they're providing additional supports for these students in the bottom 25% to grow them as soon as they possibly can to get them on grade level. And then finally, we have an English language acquisition mark. This is important for the feds. It has to carry substantial weight. And our interest here is making sure that students who are entering our schools unable to speak English proficiently are moving in terms of gaining that English language acquisition as soon as possible. The next mark is proficiency. It's making sure that students are mastering content. I think we have an obligation to do that as educational institutions, as students exit their schools. And so this is pretty simple. What % of students are at mastery or above? The board identified mastery as proficient several years ago. These are the current numbers. We have to grow these numbers. I will say that they have been growing over the last few years, but we have to continue to grow those numbers. Finally, the last section is the Thrive section. This is the section that is specifically designated towards the high school experience. And the first is simply the % of the cohort earning a diploma. Very simple. Did 83%, did 85, whatever that number is, that's the % that goes into that particular measure. Next is a measure of the nationally recognized assessment. So every student would take a nationally recognized assessment beyond the LEAP, which is a state assessment, and they would earn, if they earned a qualifying score, the school would receive credit for that particular score. Now, here's where the caveat comes into place. First of all, if HB 762 becomes law, every student in high school would have to take one of the following tests, whether it's ACT, SAT, the Classic Learning Test, Work Keys, or the ASVAB. Any student, if they meet the mark that we've set forth, they would earn credit. The difference is, if we go to the next slide, should HB 762 be vetoed, students on the university pathway would have to take the ACT, SAT, or Classic Learning Test, have one of the equivalent scores. Students on the career diploma pathway could earn credit on any of the above, but they also could take the Work Keys test, which is a career readiness test, or the ASVAB. And so that is the separation based on the governor's action. We've worked to think about the implementation of internships. We want students across the state of Louisiana to have work-based learning experiences. We hear from business and industry leaders telling us not only do students need to graduate with the soft skills ready to go to work, but they need to have opportunities for on-the-job training. And so instead of saying in year one, every student on the career acceleration has to have an internship, we've put in place a process that phases this in over a period of years. The Career College and Service Accelerator Index simply says that every student should accelerate in some particular way. They can choose the accelerator, whether it's a university accelerator, which means they have a college readiness score on a nationally recognized exam, and they've earned some form of college credit in high school. They can use the career accelerator, which could be any of the 4 options: a basic bundle and an internship, an advanced credential or an internship, a 2-year fast-forward aligned registered apprenticeship, or working with our community college system, a certificate of technical studies in a high-wage, high-demand industry. And for the first time, we're going to acknowledge that some students are prepared in high school and they choose to provide their life as service to the military. And so if a student signs a military acceptance letter, they would too receive full credit for the school in this particular acceleration index. Next slide. So once we look, this would be an example of the scorecard. It's really simple. For a school system, you take the 12 indicators, you sum the totals, and you divide by 12. If you're an elementary or a middle school, standalone, you take the % of students growing and the % of students proficient. You add those 9 together, divide by 9, and that gives you your school performance score. Will be transparent for the public. We have samples of a template of what can be provided to parents, and they can easily understand because we have been transparent with them. Okay, what % of students in the school grew in math knowledge? What % of students in the school are proficient in science? What % of students in the school graduated? It'll be right here in an easy-to-understand template. So simple and transparent, raises the bar, takes into account the definition of career and college readiness. When we look at letter grades, we looked at a couple of systems that have moved to a 100-point scale, like this system moves to a 100-point scale. We looked at Florida. Florida, for instance, the way in which they've set their letter grades, to be an A is you have to have a 62 or higher, a B a 50, a C a 33, a D a 22, or an F a 21. We also looked at Mississippi. Mississippi has a 100-point scale. You can see likewise, Mississippi sets an A at 63, a B at 53, a C at 46. And so when we looked at the way in which we wanted to do this, we decided to do a distribution, an opening distribution, and set the top 10% of schools and systems as an A, the next 20% as a B, the next 40% as a C, the next 20 as a D, and the next 10 as an F. And so just simulated, this of course will shift as we get new data in, but if we used simulated data based on this, this would be an example of the letter grade cuts that we would use when we first rolled out this particular formula. So let's go back to the first slide. It says grow, achieve, and thrive. Mr. Appel, so that is a brief overview of the system, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board have any questions? Seeing no questions, I guess we'll move to the public comment. Okay, we have a large number of cards wishing to speak, so I'm going to call 3 at a time and ask y'all to limit your talking time to 2 minutes, and please try not to be repetitious. And first of all, let me say that I'm probably going to slaughter some of these names, so let me apologize ahead of time. Ronnie Seal, St. Charles Parish Schools, come on down. Dana Talley, Lincoln Parish. Thomas Baylor, Vermilion Parish. See, I got it wrong already. Told you. Welcome. Good morning. Who wants to go first? Lady first.
Push the button. Good morning.
Everyone, if you could please hold the mic close, because it doesn't work very well. Thank you.
Okay, is that better? My name is Dana Talley. I am a member of the Accountability Council, and I'm the Chief Academic Officer in Lincoln Parish. I want to say, first of all, that Lincoln Parish is an A district, and under the simulation, we're still an A district. So my motivation is not here to try to make sure we keep Lincoln an A district. My motivation is to make sure we get this right so that schools are doing the right work for kids, and also parents can look at an SPS and it makes sense to them. So what I'm proposing is that we give ourselves a little bit of time, at least until August, to look at a few things more carefully and to give the school districts some more information. So I'm going to give you 3 reasons why I think we should wait until August to vote on this, and then just a couple of unintended consequences. So first of all, we received simulations initially, and then Friday we received some new simulations, and there was a significant difference between the simulations that we got the first time and the second time. So we're really at a place now where we don't have a lot of confidence in the simulations, and so we don't know exactly how this is going to impact schools. Second of all, I know that we looked at a lot of other states and models there, but we did make some changes. I would love a little bit more time for a policy group like Excel in Ed or Center for Assessment to look at this and give us some feedback in terms of the validity of our plan. And then third, there's still some things that we're unclear about. Our schools are going to go on and start moving now. We're already talking about this and thinking about what we need to do. And so we're still unclear about things like basic bundles and internships, and I would love some time for you guys to figure this out before we vote on it. A couple of unintended consequences. One, we have a really small school, DUBOC. They won't get their SPS on 9 components, they'll only get it on 6. And the last thing that I would say is, if you give a parent a 54 out of 100 and tell them that's an A, I don't think that makes sense to parents. I don't think it's something they'll understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Hi, my name's Tommy Byler. I'm the proud superintendent of the Vermilion Parish School System. I want to start off by saying thank you for those that I have been able to engage with throughout this process. I could come up and give you a whole lot of things wrong about the formulas, but we're beyond that point because we have a vote looming later today. I do ever come to you with a grave concern that we are jumping ahead way too fast with a proposal that has so many holes and mathematical inequalities that will cause many long-lasting unintended consequences for the public school system. I've heard the plea that this is just the first step, but I've heard this statement all too often in my 32-year career to be very hesitant when that statement is made. I'm struggling with the fact that my school system, a proud top 10 district for the past 8 years and the tops in the Acadiana region for the past 12 years, will go from a system with 14 A schools to 3 with this proposed simulations that we've been sent. To not have one high school achieve an A status when we have 3 that have been in the top 10 every year traditional public schools that have no admission standards are classified as magnet independent school districts. All of this with only one change in the assessments, that being the internship weighting in a rural district with very few opportunities. At a point where the teacher shortage is real and the teacher morale is a battle every day, and at a time where school choice is being pushed harder than ever, I fear that my once strong and proud district will be hampered by an accountability system that tells us everything that we have been doing for years is no longer good at all. Add to this a new evaluations model at the same time, and we are headed for the perfect storm in the public education system. Are we really going to change the outcomes of what we're looking for? We have the same curriculum, the same assessments, but yet we're just looking at them in a different way. I sit before you not opposed at all to taking this system if we truly have a formula in place that helps achieve these goals. This all seems way too fast for it to make really any kind of sense. I plead to you that we pump the brakes, run pilot studies, and continue to work with all stakeholders to fine-tune this system. Not one that will completely demoralize those in the public school system to be judged by a letter grade and the school name. Same assessments, same curriculum, same processes. A district, 13 A schools, no D and F districts, becomes a B district with only 3 A districts and 4 D and F schools. Hard for me to make that make sense when nothing is really changing. Thank you, and I hope enough of you will make the right decision to study this a little bit more later today.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Ronnie Seal. I am the Curriculum Specialist for School to Careers for St. Charles Parish Public Schools. In my role for our school system, I currently serve on several workforce development teams, including the Area 14 WIOA Workforce Development Board, the Workforce Development Committee of the River Region Chamber of Commerce, and I work with the Perkins Regional Team for the Regional Labor Market Area 1, which includes the greater New Orleans area. We work to ensure that we're offering courses and industry-based certifications that align with economic and workforce projections so that we can provide a better trained workforce for Louisiana and to set up students for successful lives. I would not be able to be at peace with myself if I didn't help you to look through a workforce development lens and see that by approving this proposed system, you'll be setting Louisiana back 15 years. When I first saw the proposed accountability system, I immediately recognized the negative impacts it would have on many of the strides Louisiana school systems have made in recent years regarding more high school students earning college credit and industry-based certifications. By helping students earn college credit while they're in high school, we're helping to make a post-secondary training more attainable and making it more affordable. By training students to earn industry-based certifications, we're not only helping them have a certification that can open doors, we're also ensuring that our training programs are aligned to industry standards. The proposed system values high school student performance on the LEAP test at 75%, and it devalues college credit and IBCs by combining these in a group of 6 measures, including graduation cohort, student performance on ACT, AP, and military service for the remaining 25%. It's a fallacy to think that just by focusing on LEAP scores that we will be producing students who will be a more qualified workforce. I am constantly contacted by employers who are looking to hire our students because they know our students have earned relevant IBCs. Not once have I had an employer ask a graduating student for his or her LEAP score. Ironically, in the name of progress and simplicity, do you realize that the proposed accountability system is eerily similar to Louisiana's accountability system that was used from 2006 to 2010? If you want to know what the results of the proposed accountability system will produce, you only need to look at the results from 15 years ago. At the time, LEAP, iLEAP, and G accounted for 70% of a high school score, and the graduation rate counted for 30%. Very similar to what we're seeing now. I challenge you, before you approve this proposal, please ask the LDOE to provide you with the number of IBCs and college credit students earned under the 2010 accountability system, and ask them how Louisiana students were performing compared to the rest of the nation. In essence, the proposed system will bring us back to where we were, but with fewer college credits and with fewer industry-based certifications. I sincerely appreciate your time and consideration this morning, and I earnestly invite you to contact me if you have any questions regarding how the proposed accountability system will negatively impact workforce development.
Thank you. Okay, the next group is Amy Walker, representing herself. Melissa I'm sorry, I can't read your writing. Maniero, I hope that's right, from Caddo. Dr. Ken Ertling from St. Charles, and while they're coming down, Adam Knapp does not wish to speak from the Committee of 100, but supports the recommendation. Who wants to go first? We'll start on the end. Go ahead.
Is the light on?
Yeah, hold the mic closer and make sure it's turned on.
There we go. Okay,
That's better.
can we reset?
I think that's fine.
Thank you. Good morning, my name is Amy Walker, and I currently serve as the high school curriculum specialist for St. Charles Parish Public Schools. For the past 22 years, I've worked in Louisiana public high schools, 10 of which were spent teaching ninth grade English. Today, I am addressing you as an educator, but also as a parent of two Louisiana public high school students, or two students in Louisiana public schools. First, I want to express gratitude to those of you who have asked tough questions about the proposed accountability revisions, those of you who've committed to becoming well-informed and have had the courage to acknowledge the critical shortcomings in the various iterations of the revisions. Because high schools will align their time, efforts, and funding to how they're measured, it's crucial that our high school accountability system reflects what is most valued by parents, students, and educators. If you ask any parent of a high school student seeking a university diploma what's important to them, they will tell you it's their student's ACT score. ACT scores are the single most important assessment measure for high school students in this area, determining whether those students will be accepted into college and whether they'll receive scholarships that in many cases make the difference between being able to afford college or not. And yet, in the proposed accountability system, ACT, or any alternate nationally recognized assessment, is worth just 8% of a high school's grade, 1 of 12, as was stated earlier. This proposed weighting of indicators communicates that just 15 English learners achieving proficiency on an English language acquisition assessment is equally important to the ACT score achieved by every single student in the cohort. LEAP 2025 assessments comprise up to 75% of a high school's letter grade, and yet LEAP courses account for just 15 to 25% of a student's overall coursework. The growth measures for ACT make up to 32% of a high school's letter grade, and they rely on 4 courses of the 25 courses that are required for high school graduation. The acceleration indicator is worth just 8% of a high school's letter grade, which undoubtedly will result in high school students being offered fewer opportunities to earn college credits. Bessie has mandated that the college and career readiness definition shall strongly influence the model. If that's true, then an accountability system that places so little value, 8%, on earning actual college credit is inherently flawed. Your decision today is far more consequential than assigning letter grades to schools. The value that you assign to ACT and advanced college credit earning opportunities, or a lack thereof, will directly impact opportunities for Louisiana high school students, including mine.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Melissa Monero. I am from North Louisiana. I'm the Executive Director of Accountability and Grants in Caddo Parish Schools. And I come to you to definitely agree with what's been said prior to this, but I want to tell you an example of a student at a non-selected high school in our district. This student, when you think about what they've accomplished, they graduated on time under the university pathway. They earned an associate degree from a regionally accredited university in our state. They earned a gold work piece. The ACT English score of this student is a 24, the ACT Math a 20, and the composite a 19. Under the current model, this student would be a no, if you will, if they met that expectation under 2 of the 3 indicators of Thrive. Because they chose to be the university pathway but did not accomplish that 20 ACT, instead had the 19, but certainly had some other marks there. And so my question is this the intent? So I do echo that we need more time to study this. Is this really what we want this to reflect? When you ask the question of this student, is this student ready for life after high school? There are several indicators there that definitely indicate they are, or the student is. And the answer would be no, under 2 of the 3 Thrive indicators. The other question is, did this school prepare this student? Did they put programs in place for this student to be successful after high school? I would say yes. There's indicators here that show the answer to be yes and reflect that. But this current model and proposal does not. So I ask you to revisit some of these things, make sure that we get it right, that when we answer the question yes or no for any of the indicators, that it is truly what we want it to reflect of the work our schools do and the things our students accomplish. Thank you.
Sir.
Good morning. Dr. Ken Orling, Superintendent of St. Charles Parish Public Schools, as well as the Vice President of the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents. First, let me say we certainly appreciate the opportunity to engage in discussions relative to this accountability proposal. Similar to your priority as a board to make a simple yet increasing the rigor of an accountability system is something that we share in this proposal. However, unfortunately, rushing through this process and not fully vetting the formula, as you've heard examples this morning, and you'll hear some more later, to determine all impacts just does not make for a good product yet. While there are many concerns, including the disproportionate weight of EL indices, the primary concern I'll focus on again is the disproportionate emphasis on end-of-course tests. While these 6 tests out of a possible 32 in our school system are important and valuable in assessing student achievement, the over-reliance on them will lead to a narrow focus on instructional practices and opportunities, neglecting the vitally important aspects of a student's education and hopefully career path. This unbalanced weight also significantly diminishes the value of the strength of a diploma. We will take a step backward from the valuable college and career preparation that this state and you as a board have emphasized for the last 10 years. By combining dual enrollment, industry-based certifications, ACT work keys, and graduation cohort all in one indices, schools will receive far less credit and thus less incentive for such valuable examples of college and career readiness. When I speak to our industry representatives in St. Charles Parish that are globally represented around this country and this world, including Dow, Shell, Valero, Bayer, Energy, just to name a few, who are the main economic drivers of this state, and I would bear to say this country, they have significant concerns on the value of the indices presented in this current formula. To give you a brief insight to our close partnership with these companies, they sit on academic advisory boards and advise us on curriculum, types of industry-based certifications, and programs we should develop to support workforce development in our region. Our graduates who work in their global companies directly drives our economic engine as a state and country. In part, because these businesses rely on our community to have a great public school system represented by a high letter grade, we will shift our focus, if this proposal goes through, to ensure our accountability letter grade reflects this new priority of EOC tests. Unfortunately, on the backside of that, it'll mean we'll have to divert attention away from career and workforce development initiatives that support their workforce. No company wants to send their employees to live in a community that may have a low rated by an accountability letter grade score. Seeing the new proposal and the simulations run, all scores across the entire state drop between 30 and 50%. When you talk about global companies trying to attract employees to live in our communities, that letter grade does matter. It should be valued for what it represents. As high schools serve a function of academic, career, and life preparation, the Thrive or Diploma Center Index should remain a strongly weighted component of our accountability system to ensure schools are incentivized to equip students with the skills needed to thrive beyond high school. We need a more well-rounded accountability formula that accurately reflects the diverse goals of everyone's educational systems. Last, provided one such example to Bessie members and the department as a more balanced approach, but was a compromise, with the same intended results, with simplicity and rigor, more of a weight of a 60 to 40% weight. If you'd like a copy, I've made them available as well. In closing, I respectfully request that Bessie, at least, at a minimum, delay the adoption of this new accountability system until the concerns are properly vetted by educational and business leaders around our state, and a comprehensive review of intended and unintended impacts is understood and appropriately planned. This will ensure the final formula, that we all want to be rigorous and simple, is balanced, well-informed, and conducive to our Louisiana students' overall growth and development.
Thank
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, Frank Jabia, Stephen Zaffarou, St. Charles, I'm sorry, Frank is from St. Tammany. Mary Beth Hughes from LABI. Come on down. Welcome. Who wants to go first? Wait, hold your mic close. We can't hear.
Might help to turn it on.
Turn it on.
Here we go.
Okay. Now,
Good morning, Bessie members. My name is Mary Beth Hughes, representing Lobby. We serve over 2,000 employers from across the state, businesses large and small, and we serve as the state's Chamber of Commerce. We come to the table today enthusiastically supporting this accountability proposal. You will hear a lot today on why this formula, for those who support it, is great for kids and families, and that's a huge reason we are supportive of this proposal. But the vote you will take today also has major economic implications. And Lobby believes that in passing this new proposal, it will incentivize new business development and retain current business development. Employers are choosing not to invest in Louisiana, and many companies that started in our state are choosing to leave. A large part of that is how we measure success in our current accountability system. Businesses want the confidence that when they choose to do business in our state, that their employees have quality education options for their children, as was mentioned earlier. But when almost 70% of our schools are currently rated A or B, but we're still in the bottom 10 nationwide, that's a pretty big disparity and can lead to uncertainty for parents. Our current school letter grades are extremely inflated. This new, simple formula would raise the bar for schools and provide families with clarity when they're weighing the best education path for their child. One of the items we're most excited about in this new formula is the work-based learning focus. Our members consistently say their biggest challenge is finding qualified workers, and when you have students coming out of high school with quality work experience, internships, and industry-based credentials, it could change the game for the Louisiana workforce. This formula goes a long way in addressing their concerns as it relates to workforce, and our members are looking forward to welcoming students into their companies through internships and apprenticeships. As the state's Chamber of Commerce, I would like to thank you, Bessie members, and the Department of Education for your work to provide high-quality education options for our kids and reject the status quo so that we can keep homegrown talent here, attract new business, and make Louisiana the best state in the nation to work and raise a family.
thank you. Yes, sir.
Good morning. Dr. Stephen Zaffro, Director of Instructional Support for St. Charles Parish Public Schools and Accountability Contact. When I was an economics major in college, one of the first lessons the professor taught us was that incentives matter. People and organizations respond to incentives, and you can see this in the data. In the context of what is being considered today, accountability incentives set up by Bessie will shape where schools across the state will focus their scarce resources, their scarce time, money, and staff. To be sure, the current accountability proposal would result in a simpler and more streamlined system. However, the proposal would also create some bad incentives that wouldn't serve the best interests of Louisiana students with outcomes that I don't think this board would want either. Specifically, the new proposal devalues the work of high schools around career and college readiness. Under our current system, a high school earns 25% of its points from its Strength of Diploma Index, a measure of how many students earn industry-based certifications and college credits while still in high school. These efforts demand substantial investment of time, money, and staff on the part of schools. That said, this incentive has worked, and you can see it in the data. From 2012 to 2023, the number of AP exams administered grew from 9,600 to 21,000, and the number with a passing score grew from 4,100 to 8,900, more than doubling. On the industry-based certification side of things, 38% of students earned at least a basic certification in 2013, and by 2022, this number had grown to 58%, a 20 percentage point increase. Under the proposal being considered today, all of those efforts would be devalued, incentivizing schools to focus on them less. They would go from being worth 25% of a high school's performance score down to 8%, 1/3 as much. Does Bessie really want to encourage high schools to shift their scarce resources from these efforts and potentially reverse the progress we've made as a state? Does it want to encourage school systems to offer fewer AP courses because they are difficult to staff and schedule? Does it want high schools to offer fewer career and technical certifications that would help fill high-demand jobs in Louisiana? Or be less aggressive in pursuing industry partnerships, thereby weakening the pipeline of workers to our state's businesses? Louisiana educators, parents, businesses, and Bessie itself do not want to see these outcomes. But if we structure our accountability incentives in this way, I worry this is exactly what we might see. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, Frank Jaffee, Superintendent at St. Tammany. Thank you guys for giving me a moment to speak. I spoke at the SAC meeting this past Thursday. In St. Tammany, I have 55 schools. 11 of those schools contain grades 3 or smaller inside of their building. So when you look as of Thursday, when I spoke, the accountability for those schools is determined by one factor. The first-time testers of a third grader must score advanced or mastery. That's it. They must score advanced or mastery. In our first time a child has ever seen a LEAP test, ever. So we've got to make sure that we understand the constraints and the issues that we're causing on those campuses to those first-time testers, to the parents of those first-time testers, to the teachers of those first-time testers. It is just a huge burden to put on that one grade level, and that's our configuration. I can't change that right now. I have 11 schools that fall into that mix. And I'm just asking, and I think this whole entire group is asking, for us just sit down, to slow down and make sure that we are capturing the data that we truly want to capture and the accountability model that we all want to capture. Accountability, St. Tammany Parish, no one holds a superintendent to a higher standard than St. Tammany holds me. So I completely understand that, and I hold my principals, my school-based people, to that same accountability standard. Lastly, I've only been the superintendent in St. Tammany for 3.5 years. The 27 years prior to that, I was a high school building level or teacher on a high school campus. At no time has any recruiter at any level of any student of mine ever asked for an EOC state test. They've asked for transcripts, they've asked for rank in class, they've asked for GPA, they've asked for weighted GPA, they've asked for ASVAB, they've asked for ACT, they've asked for dual enrollment, they've asked for AP, you name it, they've asked for it. Never in the history of my time as an Algebra 1 teacher, as a tested grade teacher, has anyone ever asked for that. So I'm asking you guys to let's take a look at it. Let's prioritize what kids and families truly prioritize in this state, and that is the ACT and all the components that go around that. That is what is respected by the families and the communities around the state of Louisiana. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call down 4 at a time instead of 3 next time, and I remind everyone to try to hold it to 2 minutes. Chandler Smith, West Baton Rouge Parish. Kate Swinburne from Youth for New Orleans. Louis Varon from Iberville Parish. And J.T. Stroder from Baker. Go ahead, start.
Good morning. My name is Chandler Smith. I'm the superintendent of West Baton Rouge Parish Schools. This accountability model asks a simple question. What percent of students met the expectation? The Florida model asks that same question. However, major differences are called into question. Our implementation of this model does not answer that question. I'd like to call your attention to 3 issues. The first one, under achievement. The Florida model awards percent proficient, or those that met the expectation, at level 3, at a level 3 of 5. We only award those percentage points to level 4 and 5, not level 3. So we've removed the mean. So in the math doesn't math. We've removed the entire bell curve of that assessment, of our assessment series, the LEAP. Secondly, the Florida model includes a middle school accelerator. I'm extremely worried about the middle school piece in our model. We removed high school credits from middle school. We removed the accelerator of those students taking Algebra 1 and English 1 and geometry in middle school. There's no, lack of a better word, points for those middle school accelerators. The Florida model has that. We treat our middle schools in this new formula like elementary schools. They are not. Thirdly, college and career acceleration. We, too, met with our industry-based partners and our chamber, and when we told them that in this model, 75% of the high school score comes from the 9th and 10th grade experience of EOCs, and only 25% comes from the 11th and 12th grade experience of internships and ACT, graduation rate, and industry-based credentials, they were appalled. They were appalled. The Florida model does not include ACT. The Florida model, they want you to do internships, but they're not required. They're not required. We would love a more balanced approach on the high school, college, and career acceleration. ACT hits 2 indicators. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. And all we ask is that we don't want you all to think that school systems are opposed to the model. The Florida model is, I actually kind of like it. It's simple, it's clear, it's transparent. What we've done to it, however, is quite the opposite. I asked Bessie to please take the time to get this right, and let's slow this down.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good morning, and thanks for allowing us to speak today. I did email all of you over the weekend with some of the concerns that I have that are strictly factual and not opinion-based. I support most of what's in this plan and have absolutely no problem with it at all. I began my career 30 years ago when there was no accountability system, and I think we've progressed quite greatly over those past 30 years. However, there are a few items in this that I really think need to be looked at a lot more closely. First off, when it comes to simulations, apparently our calculators are not ready. I've emailed in regards to simulation scores, and the LDOE has indicated to me that there were 2 errors. One of them had to do with calculation of the growth scores. The other one had to do with EL. I was told that the kindergarten and through 2nd grade EL scores were not included in the original simulation, but yet I have a high school with 7th through 12th graders that had no score to begin with and now have one. If the calculations are not ready, then certainly we're not ready to adopt this program. When it comes to EL, 1.5% of my population are EL, yet they count for 8.3% of my accountability score for the district. On another note, I beg you to consider adopting the provisions of House Bill 762 regardless of what the governor does with it. My son scored a 19 on the ACT. At 15 years old, we decided as a parent to put him on a university pathway. He started working at a major chemical industry yesterday and will make more than any starting teacher in the state of Louisiana at 18 years old. Parents choose to put their kids on a university pathway. We want parents to choose charters. We want parents to choose privates. We want all the parent choice. But my son would have counted as a 0 in this system when it came to the national recognized assessment for high school. And my students enrolling in the military, that the military says they're ready for life. They're ready to die for our country, but yet the parent had them on a university pathway at 15 years old. This system would state that they're a zero and they're not ready to go fight and die for our country. There's some fundamental things that need to be slowed down, and I beg you to at least consider the provisions of House Bill 742, because it values what our kids choose to do 2 years after their parents made a choice for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, members. I'm Kate Swinburne, founder and CEO of Youth Force NOLA. As you know, we're a nationally recognized leader in career-connected learning. The Youth Force NOLA Network equips New Orleans public school students with the skills and know-how they need, including through industry credentials, work-based learning, college credits, and soft skill development to take charge of their futures and successfully navigate their next steps in life. Statewide, we also work with partners like many of you to advance enabling policy, data, and narratives about career-connected learning. I'm here today with a white card, neither green nor red, with a white card to provide information on the accountability proposal before you. There are a set of elements in the proposal that Youth Force views positively. We view positively allowing students on each graduation pathway to pursue any accelerator, and we believe that it will help school systems prepare students for both college and career. We also believe that phasing in the requirements for internships to be paired with industry-based credentials will enable school systems and regions to build out their internship systems and will ensure that they aren't disincentivized from supporting attainment of industry-based credentials in the near term. In the immediate term, we look forward to supporting both the department and the Louisiana Workforce Commission with accelerator, internship, and associated high school support implementation. In particular, we look forward to engaging on refinements to the approved list of credentials, including the proposed basic bundles, as well as supporting internship scaling efforts. Young people across Louisiana are eager to make informed decisions about their futures. We can expand options, opportunity, and prosperity for our young people and our state if we continue to reimagine and strengthen the high school experience.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Superintendent Brumley, board members, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I was actually here today not for this item, but I was here for another item to support one of our career and technical partners that we're partnering with in Baker and state approval with that organization. But, you know, I wish I could sit here and tell you, you know, that we're an A district, and if you make this decision, you know, you're going to knock us down to an F, but quite frankly, you know, most folks here, I think, know where Baker is. We've been an F district for a number of years, except last year. We moved up from an F to a D. We moved our high school up from an F to a D. And that's a small win for the community of Baker. We're getting ready to open a new high school in July that we've been without for 8 years. That's another small win for Baker. And I've worked with at-risk kids my entire career. I've worked with at-risk districts my entire career. When you're working with at-risk students and at-risk districts, you have to create small opportunities for wins. And we're creating those in Baker. This accountability system will take that win away from us. So I'm not saying don't change the accountability system, but I'm saying please take a look at it and make sure that you incentivize your accountability system to encourage districts, not dishearten them. This will dishearten the community of Baker.
Thank you very much. Okay. The next group will be Danny Garrett from LSBA, who's in opposition. Barry Irwin, Council for a Better Louisiana, in support. Dana Peterson, New Orleans, New Schools for New Orleans, in support. And Erin Benderly in support from Pelican Institute. Come on down. You want to start on the end down there?
Yeah. Thank you. I'm Barry Irwin, President of Council for a Better Louisiana, and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm here to tell you that Cable supports this plan, and we appreciate the work and the input that's been available to go into this plan for some period of time. We have been talking about this not for weeks, not for months, and not for years. And so we are here to ask that you approve this plan today. From our perspective, it addresses really all of the major concerns that we've been grappling with on this issue for some time. It's simple, it's transparent, and it uses just 12 measurements to really see how our kids are doing in 3 key areas. The first is growth, and this is something we've obviously talked about for a very long time. It places a greater emphasis on the growth piece of it, not just for incremental growth, but for significant growth, and we think that's very important. The second area is achievement, and it measures this in probably the most straightforward way that we possibly can by simply looking at the percentage of our kids who are performing or mastery, in English, science, social studies, and math. That's the measurement that we all believe is very important. And finally, for high school, it does a variety of things to make sure that our kids are prepared for college, career, whatever that might be. Now, is it perfect? Obviously, you've heard a lot of concerns today that suggest that there are other things that could be done. You've heard from some of our own groups who feel like there are some things that we could further do at the high school level to enhance that experience. That said, we are totally confident that you, if you approve this today, which we hope you will continue to review all the elements of the program, all of the indicators, make sure that they are performing in the way that we want them to perform, achieving the goals that we want them to achieve, and make adjustments in the future as necessary. But we keep hearing about delay, delay, delay. We've been talking about this again for more than 2 years. A lot of work has gone into this. We feel like now is the time to move forward. We believe this plan is strong, rigorous, transparent in many ways, and we certainly ask for your approval of the plan today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excuse me, Danny Garrett, Executive Council, Louisiana School Boards Association. I sort of got into this. I've been representing local governments for a long time. I got into the education sphere in 2012, and I have been amazed in the 11 or so years that the accountability system changes seemingly almost all the time. One of the first things is we went from a 200-point scale to a 150-point scale, and we're told by the department that'll make it easier for parents to understand. We didn't understand that at the time, and we still don't understand it now. Then in 2017, they came in and said, well, you know what, we're gonna give different credit for basic and mastery. We're just gonna change it. It's kind of the opposite of what the legislature just did to our students when they moved from what was a 7-point scale to a 10-point scale. Because what's gonna happen next year in high school is the kid that made a 92 is gonna get an A, whereas the kid who took algebra this past year, even if he was ahead of him and made a 92, he got a B. They just changed the number. It was such a radical change that we, in fact, had legislation that said issue 2 scores so that we can compare the year prior to the year before that. And what's interesting is we looked at it, schools across the state got better, although their scores went down using the new scoring mechanism, just simply because we decided to change how we score them. We got better, but we looked worse. Didn't make any sense. We then put us on a path to, instead of 90, we were going to go to 95 and then 100 for A. Well, then COVID hit, and so they compressed that. So then we were on a schedule of going from 90 to 95 to 100 over a 3-year period. Well, now that looks like that's been scratched out, so we're ditching that. Now we're making a holistic change that changes the minimum ACT from 18 to 20, and we're going from a 150-point scale to a 100-point scale. And this is all within a period of, 13 years. I actually had a friend of mine who's on a school board first year, and he is a self-proclaimed reformer, and he said he's never understood. He looked back and he said, we've not had the same accountability system for 5 or 6 years, ever. Please take a step back. Please listen to these people on the ground who are telling you, look, whatever you tell them to do, they're going to shift and do. And from a school board's perspective, we're going to shift the funding to your top priority. But when you change your top priority every 3, 4, or 5 years, we ditch everything we did and we have to do something different. Everyone that has spoken to you wants better outcomes for kids. They want a better high school experience for kids. In 2020, we had parents descend on Baton Rouge when LHSAA considered not having fall sports. And parents demanded that fall sports are a critical element of a high school experience. How dare you? And LHSAA changed their mind. We have never once in this state valued anything extracurricular. The parents care. but we as a state have never cared. Please step back before you make this wholesale change and make sure that it's actually going to accomplish what we want to accomplish, and listen to the people who do this every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Bessie members and Dr. Brumley. My name is Dana Peterson, and I'm the CEO of New Schools for New Orleans. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. At NSNO, we're dedicated to ensuring every child in New Orleans has access to a high-quality education, and we believe that measuring growth, of course, is a key component to improving student outcomes. We believe we should incentivize and reward schools and educators that are supporting students to grow, achieve, and thrive. In January, months before the proposal was released, we identified, working with our stakeholders, 4 key position statements that we would use to guide our evaluation of any proposed changes to accountability. First, growth must be substantial and meaningful component of any statewide system moving forward. Future growth models must effectively measure growth and incentivize improvement for all students, with an emphasis on our lowest performing students and schools with high concentrations of low performing students. It is imperative to assess, report, and reward growth in K-8 and high school. And if the proposed model is an improved, more rigorous measure of growth, then growth should hold more weight in the overall formula. We've reviewed the LDO proposal with these values in mind and believe that what Dr. Brumley has put before you is aligned with many of these positions. First, we commend the proposed formula's increased focus on student growth. Next, we support the proposed formula's recognition of growth at all levels, including growth for the very lowest performing students. And we also appreciate the department's commitment to provide additional information and recognition for growth outside of the formula. However, there are a few areas in which we believe the proposal can be strengthened to further incentivize and honor exceptional growth in all of our schools. Specifically, we recommend that the Value-Added Growth Award be broadened to reward schools performing in the 90th percentile above. Currently, the proposed policy specifies that the Value-Added Growth Award would be given to schools performing in the 99th percentile, which we believe would only be about 12 schools across the state for each subject. Performing at the 90th percentile or above is still incredibly exceptional, and broadening this award to account for that ensures that those schools would be recognized. Further, we recommend that the department commit to calculate and publish on the school scorecards a separate score and letter grade for growth in addition to the overall school score and letter grade. A separate growth score and letter grade will help educators, families, and the public make meaning from the growth numbers and help them better understand which schools are growing students well and which are not. We recommend this growth score and letter grade also be calculated and published for the state school systems and student subgroups. Before I close out, I want to share and draw your attention to a recent news story you might have seen highlighting one of the recent graduates of New Orleans Public Schools. Elijah Hogan just graduated as valedictorian of Walter L. Cohen High School, a charter school operated by Collegiate Academies. For the past year and a half, while Elijah was working hard to earn top grades in high school, Elijah was also homeless and living at Covenant House, a homeless shelter for teens in New Orleans. Elijah's mother died when he was only 8 years old, one of the many hardships this young man has faced. Elijah now has a full ride to Xavier University in the fall, and he has a message for other young people. He says, and I'm quoting him here, "Don't let others define who you are. Don't let things get you down. Let these moments help you get through. Despite where you are or the area you're in, even though it might look bad, there are moments where there will be people who will give you a guiding hand. Take that opportunity." Now, the conversation we're having here today about points and calculations and policies may seem very removed from Elijah, but we all know that they have very real implications for our educators and our students and the direction they head in school and in life. And it's with Elijah and others in mind that I bring these comments and recommendations to you today. We want an accountability formula that doesn't define children, an accountability formula that encourages more guiding hands and opportunities for students like Elijah. So thank you for your time and consideration, and we look forward to continuing to collaborate to ensure great opportunities for all young people in New Orleans.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. My name is Erin Bindley with the Pelican Institute for Public Policy.
Is your microphone on?
It's on.
Okay.
I'll try to be louder. That's usually not
Please.
a problem I have. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. Erin Bindley with the Pelican Institute for Public Policy. We're here in support of the recommendation
not only to support the policy, but to support its implementation as quickly as possible. We have had the pleasure of working with you all and the last board and the department for a very long time. This is not something that has been done swiftly. You might recall that Bessie formed a work group to look into accountability and to address known problems and deficiencies in the current policy in February of 2022. We have been at this for 28 months. So for individuals calling for further delay, I would simply ask, how much time do we need? When are we going to say, you know, we're never going to get to something perfect that everyone will agree to. But we have to move forward for the benefit of our students because we know that what we have right now is not serving them well. So we would ask you to move forward without delay. We come to this really advocating for a strong policy that addresses 3 core principles. And we believe this policy does that. It's simple and easy for parents, educators, and the public to understand, with the primary goal being transparency, not to overcomplicate it, and not trying to solve for all things through an accountability policy. And that has been a mistake that we've made in our state too many times through accountability policy. We don't have to repeat those mistakes. We also appreciate the strong focus on proficiency for all students, and that's not to devalue career work or industry-based credentials or work-based learning. All students need a strong academic foundation. I have yet to meet an employer who says that they need kids who can't read and do basic math. This is not a trade-off, and this is not something where you have to be on one side or the other for college or for careers. All kids need a minimum foundational level of education. We owe it to all of them to focus on that first and foremost before we do anything else. That should be our minimum expectation. And 3, we appreciate that this formula values the growth of all students individually, not just on a relative measure, not just are you doing better than or just as good as or just as flat as your neighbor. We want every child growing and meeting their full potential, and we appreciate that this policy does that. So again, we appreciate the work that's gone into this. It represents a lot of work not only by you as still relatively new board members, but this has been a long time coming. We urge you to move forward without delay because we truly believe that the focus and the supports that will be available to students because of this new policy, we cannot afford to delay any further. Those students need those supports right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next group. Bridget Nealon from CSUSA supporting, Belinda Davis representing herself opposing, Caroline Romer, Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools for information, and our very important partner in this effort, Jim Garvey from the Louisiana Workforce Commission for information. I saw him. Mr. Garvey, there you are. Okay. You want to start on this end?
Thank you. Of the over 3,400 students desiring to enroll in a CSUSA school, and our mission is a relentless commitment to student greatness in school and in life. We're very happy to work collaboratively with the department on expanding school choice, finding educational excellence in every setting, and creating an education accountability system that is incentivizing schools and school leaders to serve all students, but especially the most at-risk students. CSUSA likes the formula because it resembles very much one they've worked under in Florida for many years. We have more than 50,000 students in Florida, and within that network have some of the highest performing schools in the nation. 2/3 of the schools in Florida, in the schools in Florida, 2/3 of the students are economically disadvantaged and at risk and still manage to achieve. We thank you all for your efforts and look forward to continuing to work collaboratively as this formula develops. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Belinda Davis, and I want to make clear that I have never been employed by a school district. I've never been employed as a lobbyist. I am, however, a public policy scholar who has published research on incentive structures and how they affect parents' opinions of public schools. I am the I'm the parent of current public school children in our state and former, so I have experienced as a family our accountability systems, and I also was on the accountability work group when I was on Bessie. It was really a difficult decision around whether or not to do an information only or opposition. There is a lot of good things. There are a lot of good things in the proposed accountability system, but I have a couple of things that I have major concerns over, and so I'll briefly list them. Well, first, I know that LEAP Connect kids are only 1% of our state's population, but when you don't have a plan for including them in the accountability system, it makes them seem like an afterthought, and I would urge this board and the department to look at LEAP Connect children and how they're going to fit into our accountability system. We did a lot of really good work around that when I was on the IEP and accountability work group, so I'd urge you to go back and revisit what we did. But secondly, I like to be able to admit it when I'm wrong, all right? And I was a really big skeptic of dual enrollment for everyone when I was on this board. But while I was on this board, and since I've left it, there is a growing body of evidence that suggests that dual enrollment increases the likelihood of students graduating from community college and doing so in a timely manner. I am concerned that the current accountability system disincentivizes students and school districts to invest in dual enrollment. There's a recent study out of about 60,000 students in Tennessee that shows that participation in just one dual enrollment class more than doubles your odds of graduating from a community college, and that is even for students who score below an 18 on the ACT. And so right now, this current model says that you have to have a 20 on the ACT and be on the university pathway to earn any points for dual enrollment. And so if you have a student, as if you're a district with scarce resources and dual enrollment is expensive, if you have a student who's struggling with an 18 on the ACT, there is no incentive for that district in this accountability system to offer that student dual enrollment, which something increasingly the data seems to suggest increases their likelihood of being successful in earning post-credentials in a community college. And then secondly, my big concern is around the gold as the level under work keys for proficiency. The average ACT score of a student who scores gold on work keys is between 22 and 26. That's not my data, that's the ACT Corporation's data. And so when you design an incentive structure, it ought to be aspirational. You ought to have to reach for those top scores, but it also has to be a realistic goal. And so right now, less than 50% of students who take the work keys score a gold. To put this into like personal perspectives, my son just graduated from LSU last month with a 3.8 GPA, and according to the AC Corporation, he would have a 40% chance of failing to achieve a gold on the work keys given his ACT score. So be aspirational, make people reach, but it has to be something that is attainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Garvey, or one of y'all.
Good morning. Caroline Romer. I'm the Executive Director of the Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools. I really need a card that could divide up so I could give different reasons to be at the table, some support, some like questions. I have 150 bosses in this state. That's the number of charter schools we have. And they were not fully aligned on this proposal. But I've been doing this work now for almost 16 years. And I've never seen an accountability proposal where everyone comes to the table joyful and ready to get this done. So I don't think this is anything unusual. Accountability for charter schools is significant in that if we don't reach the standards that you have set for us, we don't get to continue to do the work. So we deeply value not only families making choices, educators having the flexibility to make decisions as close to kids as possible, but we are rooted in accountability. And so you have the hard job of figuring out what the priorities should be how to measure those priorities, and let us go do the work. So today I'm at the table to say, I didn't hear that much from my membership. On the K-8 side, they seem pretty overall happy and appreciate that you have listened and heard about growth being a major component that we feel should be increased in the formula, so we love that part of it. But on the high school side, I definitely fielded questions from folks to Dr. Davis's point, heard a lot about, will dual enrollment still be valued? A lot of our schools are doing really incredible work with students earning associate's degrees before they graduate. So they want to know, is that still going to be valued? Does that still matter? The ACT score. I've got school leaders that don't even believe the ACT is the right test. So again, you can please some of the people some of the time. You will never please all of the people all of the time, but it's why you make the big bucks to get to make this decision for us. I want to say we appreciate the time that Dr. Brumley and his team has spent talking to our members and answering questions and even making some changes. One of the things that I hear a lot about, two things I hear from our membership. One, there's an argument about what proficient means. We use, advanced, mastery, basic, so on and so forth. A lot of our membership are confused about the message we're sending to the public about what it means to be proficient. When we have something that says basic, doesn't that mean you're basically where you're supposed to be? So some want you to change how you're defining proficiency, including how you define what it means to be college-ready in proficiency in reading, for example, versus career-ready in proficiency in reading. Another area that we heard about, and you heard Dana Peterson from NSNO speak a little bit about it, charter schools by law are open enrollment schools. We would love to see a division of all schools that are open enrollment versus schools that are selective enrollment. We do not believe mixing the two is the fair, equitable way to demonstrate and show how schools are performing. We deeply believe that could be separated out into different things. But again, overall, I think not hearing from my membership tells me they're tired. We're doing this at the end of a school year. I think that they would tell you we're ready to move forward. We want to know what the marching orders are. We want to know how you're going to measure us and let us go do the work. As Danny said, we've changed a lot. They're ready to root in and let's move forward on this. So we do appreciate the efforts that's been put in over the last, 2 years to get to this moment. So we appreciate it, and what our last ask would be to you as Bessie members, as we move forward, we hope that you will be an advocate at the legislature. We need more resources, and we need less mandates. As our elected body representing K-12 education in this state, we hope that you will consistently show up at the legislature to help inform and to advocate on those things for our folks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Garvey.
Yes, sir. Jim Garvey with the Louisiana Workforce Commission. During my 16 years on Bessie, I did not learn everything, but one important thing that I did learn was to make sure that the mic is on and that it's pulled in close. But since going over to the Workforce Commission, I find myself talking a lot more about the workforce participation rate. That's the percentage of adults in Louisiana and nationwide that are participating in the workforce. In Louisiana, that's 58% right now. The inverse of that is the number of adults who are not participating in the workforce and not even looking for a job. In Louisiana, that's 42%. That's 42% of our adults that are not even looking to work. When you grow up in Louisiana, you learn to avoid talking about state rankings because we usually do not fare very well. But I feel obligated to point out to you that these numbers rank us 7th to last in the nation. Now, that's not last. That's not as bad as it could be, and thank goodness for Mississippi, but it's not something that we should be proud of. Something that I think everybody can agree on about this proposal is that it is much more simple than what we currently have. When you have a simple formula, it allows the educators to focus much more on getting results for the children. getting better results for the children will help improve our labor force participation rate. As a bonus, this proposed system puts a lot more focus on work-based internships. And by definition, those work-based internships put children into the workforce, and by definition, it raises our workforce participation rate. I think that these two important aspects of the proposal will help lift Louisiana up from 7th place. Thank you.
Thank you. And I might point out that one number you left out was the number of people that have decamped from Louisiana and left in the last decade or so.
That is another important number.
Huge number of people have given up looking for jobs here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, next group, Terrence Lockett from ERN, who is in support. Doris Foche from St. Bernard Parish Schools, who is in opposition. Kelly Botcher from Louisiana Kids Matter, who is in support. And I will admit this is an interesting one, Patty Glazer, who's in support and in opposition. So we'll let you go last. Yes, sir, go ahead and start.
Good morning, Superintendent and board members. Terrence Lockett, oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's on. It's on. And then,
Okay, you can't hear me? I guess I didn't follow Jim Garvey's rules. So, good morning. Once again, good morning, Superintendent. Good morning, board members. Terrence Lockett, the Executive Director of Education Reform Now, otherwise known as ERN. I sit here today to, one, thank you for bringing this recommendation, this consideration of this revision forward. We have worked on this for many years. Some of us sitting on the board, this conversation started several years ago. But what we see in what is being proposed is what is needed. A true appreciation of the growth that schools do for students to move them forward. That it wasn't recognized in in the current formula, and now it will be recognized in the new formula. And so that it goes a long way to moving our state and our students forward, because schools, students, parents have been requesting this, and now they're finally being heard. And so that being the case, thank you for your hard work that you've put into this. We're here to support, and with a year-long runway, I'm quite sure there will be many things as we look at it before implementation that will come into place, but we trust that this board will work to ensure that those changes are made and that everybody gets on board. Now, we understand that, when making changes, not everybody wants to move at the same time. Some would feel that we need to push it off, but we have the time now. We're not rushing it. We have the time. So thank you for this, and we appreciate the work.
Kelly Backer, Executive Director of Louisiana Kids Matter. First and foremost, I want to start by thanking the board and State Superintendent Kay Brumley for the hard work you put into this. As one of my colleagues mentioned earlier, this has been a labor of love over multiple years. It has definitely not been rushed. I will tell you, my entire career has been spent in education, starting in the classroom in 2005. And for my entire career, what I've always been told is we need more time, we need more time, we need more time. It's great if adults need more time. What our kids don't have is any more time to give. Last night in preparation for my testimony, I looked up our state ranking because we've been touting all the growth that we've made. And while I appreciate all the growth we've made, what I realized last night in my preparation is if you Google Louisiana state ranking for education, we are currently 47th according to US News. One of the things I noticed is Florida is #1 in both education and their economy. I want to be Florida. The one thing that Florida did in 2019 is they raised their accountability standards, they expanded their school choice, they expanded their career pathways, and in doing so, 20 years later, over 20 now, but there's a case study from 2019 that shows they were #1 in 2019. They have remained #1 since then. They did the hard work that was in the best interest for kids. I know it's hard for adults. I know it's hard to make the changes.
but I want to be Florida. I want to go from the bottom, 47th, and I want to be number 1, or at least in the top 5 for our education system and for the accountability system. If Florida can go from the bottom with making these changes and doing the hard things, but the right things for kids, Louisiana can do the exact same thing. So I applaud you for your efforts. I say, please stay the course. Our kids can't wait. Our adults will adjust. So thank you.
Good morning. First of all, I appreciate yellow cards. I want to thank all of you for your hard work. I know this has been a labor of love and a labor of work. As chair of the Accountability Council for 2.5 years, I was involved in a lot of it and did a deep dive into accountability. I'm CEO of Discovery Schools. We have been open for 11 years, and I have about a 3-year run in those 11 years where I can actually compare one year to another, and then something changes in the system where I can't compare it. So it's just an interesting time. I really appreciate the inclusion of growth at all levels. I support the public release of growth for subgroup scores, which is what New Schools for New Orleans talked about. I think subgroup scores are important and important to be recognized. Discovery's been an A-B school since we opened 11 years ago. Under the simulation that we received, if it was the correct one, we would be C schools. That doesn't scare me. We'll rise to the challenge thrown our way. But typically, we're also in the top 5, usually 1, 2, or 3, of open enrollment schools in Jefferson Parish. Of course, the magnet schools that are required admissions are above us. So I just wonder who the B schools are in the new formula. And that's something that I'm just thinking about and don't know at this point. In 2026, I believe the official scores will be under the new formula. What I read the department's response is that in 2024, a public release would be made of our scores this year under our current formula, and then the scores under the new formula. I don't think that's going to help parents in any way. We don't even know what the proposed formula is yet, and yet we're publicly releasing to parents for 2024 what that is. So I would hope that would slow down, and the release would be more like in 2025 of the comparison of the scores. It's kind of a small point, but I've been through these changes before, and I think that would be confusing to parents. I am concerned about less credit for dual enrollment and internships versus apprenticeships. It's a concern in industry and some of the industry partners that have assisted our schools in the development of various pathways with less reward for dual enrollment and internships. Our partners in industry have written to each of you about this concern and its lack of incentives to create and sustain pathways and its negative impact on workforce development. I think that part's essential to vet a little bit more and to process before passing. I've written to each of you about this. I've spoken to Ronnie about it specifically. Cut scores set on a curve concern me. The top 10% of the schools being an A, I can name the schools that are going to be in the top 10% in Jefferson Parish. They're going to be the selective admission schools. So maybe take selective admissions out of the formula. I understand the curve's going to be used only for a few years, but I think those few years are going to be detrimental to schools. Again, as the previous chair of the accountability, I know this is complex. I've looked closely at it over the last 2.5 years. I'm really surprised that with the new Accountability Council, the proposal being presented, then presented and asked for a vote in June, how quickly that happened from May to June. I would just ask for a little bit more time for vetting, processing, and discussion of a few of the issues I brought up and others brought up. Otherwise, I thank you for your work.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. I'm Doris Foche, Superintendent of Schools in St. Bernard Parish Public School System. I've been an educator now for over 50 years. I have seen many, many different versions of all of these accountability systems. I started when there was no state accountability system. We've gone through where there's been heavy emphasis on actual outcomes, then we've gone to growth, and we've done things back and forth, especially at the high school level. I know that the decisions that you make are very, very difficult, but they're extremely important because it will impact the trajectory of what's going to happen in the next few years. And when I was in that position, I was also on the Dual Enrollment Task Force and the College and Career Readiness Commission. And a great deal of work was spent upon getting a definition of college and career readiness. And I know that Superintendent Brumley alluded to that in the very beginning. But if you see the Louisiana definition of college and career readiness, as endorsed by this panel as well, it's that they're prepared for university, community college, and technical college programming without the need for remediation or co-requisite support. Now, co-requisite support is the fancy name for remediation. But what that means is they're taking a supportive course concurrently with their gateway beginning course in math and in English. The Board of Regents and the colleges have set that definition to be an 18 on the ACT in English, and a 19 in math. Those are the cut scores for the ACT to determine career and college readiness as per the definition that's been adopted by Bessie as well as the Board of Regents. So I think a lot of this discussion has been around the high school piece of this. And at the risk of being redundant, putting 75% of the weight for a high school is completely changing the focus that we have been investing in monetary and human resources in the past few years. We have been investing in workforce development and in dual enrollment opportunities for our students. Dual enrollment, AP, club courses, and then in workforce development as well. This particular formula or accountability proposal de-emphasizes that. And what we're going to have to then do, if you take a vote on this and approve this, is completely change the focus of what we consider the mission of the high school, which is taking that student at the age of 14 or 15, looking at where he is at the moment, developing his individual graduation plan, and helping him achieve that. Heavy emphasis on that 9th and 10th grade, those few EOC cores, those end-of-course exams, is not what our mission should be. Not when the child gets to that point. It should shift to workforce development. It should shift to college readiness, as defined by what we have done the work over these past several years. So I'm asking you to seriously, the formula itself we have a lot of support for. The growth piece, the simplicity of it, the yes-no piece, we have no problem with that. It's the indicator itself, especially at the high school level, that we feel needs to be tweaked. Schools and school systems don't change on a dime. No matter what people say, it takes a lot of training and investment. So if you take this vote today and put us on that pathway, what you're going to see is a major shift in focus at the high school level. So we're asking you to delay this to some extent, and it doesn't have to be that long, but to come out with more indicators in high school that we feel reflect what our high school mission is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have one last person wishing to speak, Chris Kimball from St. James, who's in opposition, and we have Christy Fine, Union Parish, who is also in opposition but does not wish to speak. You get the bat cleanup.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. First, I think we all support some type of accountability, and I agree with many areas of the current proposal. But I feel we need to be sure we get it as correct as possible before we pass this today. Our local River Region Chamber does not support this recommended accountability system, and they wrote a letter to Bessie stating as much. We do have workplace internships in St. James Parish. We're proud of what we have done in St. James Parish with our internship program. We have approximately 80 students that participate in internships within our system. Our local business and industries, they appreciate the opportunities that we have for our students and the relationships that we have built with them. This accountability system does quite the opposite of incentivizing these types of opportunities for our students and for workforce development. I ask that we do not disincentivize industry-based credentials, dual enrollment, CLEP, and that with the increase of end-of-course testing at the high school level, at the level recommended, choices will have to be made. Districts will have to make decisions. And what expense is that? What comes with that? That reduces students' opportunities. What about the overall high school experience that our parents come and want and expect? We will have to adjust as necessary, as we always have, but at what expense? I ask that we make sure we get it right before passing it today. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have one last person, Quintia Timoil. Did I get it right? Okay. Fair enough. You got to get better handwriting. She
Q
is
the simple
for
way.
information, but wishes to speak.
Yeah, Q is simple.
Q.
Q, yeah. So I'm Quintina Timmel. I speak as a parent of 2 daughters who attend public school.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you pull the mic down? It's up in the air a little bit. Yeah.
Is that better?
Thank you.
Okay. A taxpayer and an educator. I ask a simple question. Cassian and Getta, are the children well? Will our future accountability system answer this question? How does the proposed accountability system help students? How does it hurt students? We must begin with the end in mind. To have a viable district, school, and state performance score, the focus must be on teaching and learning in the classroom. This is the only way to improve student performance. Improving teaching and learning in the classroom and then measuring those inputs accordingly. The classroom is the unit of change. So what's good about the proposed system? It's on a 100-point scale. It will be easier for parents to understand when exercising school choice. It focuses on growth levels that illustrate students' progress from year to year. It focuses on individual student results rather than comparative data and statewide achievement. I won't spend time talking about what's bad about the system. You've heard that. I happen to be the last one to speak. But I would say that when we do point out what's bad, that we challenge people and ask them for solutions. If something is bad, ask them, how do we fix it? As an observer, the following is apparent to me. Pride is getting in the way of progress. Perfection is getting in the way of progress. Politics and power, it seems to lead when it should follow. Here's my call to action. We should ask ourselves the simple question, how does the proposed accountability system help or hurt students? Not does it increase or decrease the school, district, or state performance, but how does it help or hurt children? To me, that is the real question. Perfection cannot get in the way of progress. What is being proposed, let's provide relevant solutions to the worst elements, and let's also acknowledge what is good. Pride cannot get in the way of progress again. During the SAC meeting, the calculator was requested and it was committed. However, what was received was a second simulated score indicating that the first simulated score was erroneous. If the scores can't be replicated, but only simulated by the department, then I question the simplicity and the transparency of what is being proposed. Will politics and power yield mediocre results for students? Have we considered asking different stakeholders like parents, teachers, district managers about the proposed accountability system and how can it be fixed to benefit students? Is this really the best accountability system we can build if we haven't asked the people closest to the work, other than superintendents, for their input, guidance, and solutions? If these stakeholders have been a part of the conversation, then surely we would exclaim their endorsement. With the amount of power you yield, your power, your vote at this table can truly drive what is best for students. Could you yield your power to turn around this tainted accountability proposal into an accountability system that makes the entire education system in Louisiana one that benefits all students and not just some? Please find your voice so that it can point us all back to the changes that should take place, first within ourselves, then within the proposed accountability system, and then within Louisiana's education system. I sincerely believe that when I change, Louisiana will change and the world will change.
Thank you. And we got one more late arrival. Jody Rollins is information, and she's representing herself. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, this is the last one.
Okay. Is this on? I'm sorry that I decided to speak late, but I was.
No, it's no problem. I want to make sure that we got everybody that
Yeah,
wanted
I
to
was
speak.
sitting there thinking about what Dr. Davis brought up, and I am very concerned that my children in this accountability system, they don't exist. And you'll see later in this meeting, you're going to find out how much they don't matter to the Louisiana Department of Education, but it is upsetting and concerning that no one in this Bessie board is bringing up that in this formula, our children don't exist with significant disabilities. I wonder who you guys represent sometimes. And I say that because public schools, there are no private schools for my son. They don't exist. The charter schools have a lot of problematic issues, including BASIS and Great Hearts, with including students with significant disabilities. That gives them an advantage over public schools, your typical public schools, than your charter school. This year, we removed the quota for how many of those children they have to take even. And I just wonder, who do you represent? Is it all children and all ways to get an education? Because my sons are not in this formula. And I'm not the only parent out there whose children do not exist to our state accountability. It's very concerning, and I hope you guys will revisit that at some point and decide if Sammy matters to you, because he matters to me, and their kids matter to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have no further cards. So at this time, we have a motion and a second to consider revisions to Bulletin 111 as amended. Do we have any opposition to that motion? Hearing no, wait, I'm sorry, you want to speak? Wait, you got a microphone.
No, it's not that I'm opposing. Are we voting on the motion?
Yes.
Or are we going to have any discussion?
Well, we had opened it for discussion earlier. If you'd like to discuss it some more, please do.
Oh, yeah, I would. Yeah,
Go-
please. I didn't realize, usually we speak after public comments or before. Okay, thank you. My comments here are, I just want to express the gratitude, thankfulness, gratefulness, especially with District 3. And I'm talking about all 11 districts that I represent, the constituents that came forward, educators, business, the chamber, leaders, et cetera. And there were so many questions, some that I could not answer. And so as time went by with the last 5 weeks, I accumulated those questions. And it was, to me, so overwhelming. I mean, like I needed help to accumulate and to put this in a document because we needed some answers for you. That was my job as your Bessie rep. So the department could have those questions and answer, and which they did, and I appreciated that. And in turn, I forwarded back to you those questions. And of course, I have them if you haven't gotten them, but I did my best to get that to as many people as possible. So in saying that, as a district representative and accountability chair, I take this serious. And I know there were comments about we've been working on this for 2 years. Yes, I've been on Bessie, 8 years, third term. And the last 2 years, as somebody mentioned, or the 28 months, yes, there's been much conversation about let's change up, let's bring in a new system, an easier system, transparent system. And through those conversations, we did have work groups. And we came down to, hey, growth needs to be worked on. And I'm just throwing some very brief comments out. And through those conversations, there were suggestions brought forth or a plan brought forth, but as the past board, we wanted holistic, a new plan. So there was delay there, and we want a whole plan. And knowing that new board was coming in, well, let's prep for that, which we did. And so here we are. And so the first time I saw the new plan was, I guess, back in April. And then prepping for the Accountability Commission. And there were a lot of questions asked there. And I respected that, the questions that were asked. And I think, Patty, you brought that up too, about there were commission members that are asking for questions. And where are the answers? Where are the simulations? And there was another question there about the simulation. So there are a lot of unanswered questions and concerns that you have, which is legit. It's good. Those are good discussions that helped us today and helped me learn some nuances of what is that you're thinking of and wanting more to know. And there's no doubt in my mind that you don't want accountability. And you know, I'm from the background of high accountability, standards, choice. I desire that. I want that for the kids. And what are the outcomes that we have set forth here? And when I just met all of you and working and met new friends through it all, it made me appreciate where we're heading. And this is a good foundation to begin with. It's new and with growth. And I can go on through the list of the good things of it. However, there are things in this plan that I question about 70-25 or ELL. I mean, there are questions and simulations that are not up to par. And those are things that I believe that we need to work on. And somebody mentioned about the delay, and 2 years in, 28 months, I can't remember all of this, but because I'm absorbing so much. And I want you to also understand, I took these 4 or 5 weeks of studying, going in depth, and there was one thing, I'm just thinking about the Florida model. At the beginning, with the Accountability Council, when I questioned, well, oh, good, okay, we've got a new council, and I'm hearing it's the Florida model, and I asked, well, how much of this is Florida? And I was told 99%. Wow, okay, then we don't really have that much work to do to get it to the point we want. But as I'm working through this, and I'm realizing that there are several pieces that are not in our plan that Florida had that make their plan really good. From, let's use EL, that they don't use in their system as a standalone. I have the federal documents that I'm reading, trying to understand where is the language for certain things. And then even from the, including, I mean, they use, I think it's 50-50, but I'm not the mathematician about understanding how much is worth, but I do note the 6 courses versus college and career readiness. I get that 70% versus the remainder of those points. And to note, and like just yesterday, I found out that 3 of those courses are worth toward their college. So all of these things that I keep thinking about, and including yesterday with meetings, I was really on, like, where am I on this? And because we want to delay, doesn't mean we don't like this plan and the moving forward with it. And I also question, what's the swiftness of it? Why so quickly when we were presented with this in April? I just felt, and look, yeah, somebody's mentioning something about perfect, can't wait till it to be perfect. I get that, but there's still questions. And so I'm at the point of asking for a delay. That's where I am. And I'm not opposing the plan that is the baseline, Dr. Brumley. You've done a lot of work. However, that's my own opinion, and I'm representing my constituents. And when I tell you, it's been weeks, it's been hours of just getting the knowledge of And I studied enough to be able to come to this conclusion of let's work out these kinks as much as possible and continue on. So, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Did you want to say something?
I do. There seems to be incredible consensus around the K-8 component of this model. I don't know that I've heard much pushback at all from all of the testimony. All of it seems to be around the high school component. A little bit concerned that I hear business and industry on one hand, lots of testimony that local business and industry, frankly, in my district, that strongly oppose what we're doing and want more clarification. But then I'll also hear Lobby and a number of other groups who say, no, we strongly support this. So there is a bit of a disconnect that I am concerned about, because at the end of the day, if we're educating children and it is not, we're not producing the product that the community wants, that will serve them well, that what business and industry actually wants in terms of a workforce that will help them be prepared, that is a concern. There's been a lot of work put into this, and I acknowledge that. I think Ms. Bentley, Dr. Bentley put it plainly, and that is we've been working on this for 22 months. I think someone also put it plainly that, frankly, we've been working on this for about 30 years, and 16 years ago, we made a change, and so the question is, why did we make changes 16 years ago? So I want to ask the question that I raised before to the department first, and that is, we've now made some changes, but we've made a number of changes along the way. But I've not heard anything, either testimony or presentation, is, so why are we making the change? We've made changes at multiple times throughout the last 30 years or so. Have they yielded results in a way that we can share with the public and the board that says we made this change and we got a better outcome? Because I am quite certain that there was a worthy body of BESI members that weighed in on a discussion in terms of what is the state's value system. When we made certain changes to heavily weigh graduation rate for our high school, I suspect that there was a reason for that at that moment in time. And so we're making a huge departure from the value judgment we made before. So the question I have to my colleagues and to the department is, do we really have the data that says that we did these things, they did not work? We're going to make these new changes, and they're going to work, and they're going to improve the education outcome, as Dr. Timmel said, for children. And I know there are lots of adult issues, but I'm a little concerned. I'm very concerned about whether or not the changes that we're making will yield to those results, and what data do we have that when we made changes over different administrations, that they yielded the results. We sit here to discuss this, but I question whether we as a body know that. Do we know when we made changes historically, whether it yielded results? I think I heard someone say, thank God for Mississippi, because but for Mississippi, we'd be at the bottom. Well, we've made changes over 30 years, and we're close to the bottom. So my question is that, again, what data, what evidence do we have that these changes will lead to positive results? Again, I don't think I've heard any pushback on the growth component for K-8. There seems to be great consensus, but there seems to be a great deal of unreadiness, at least at the high school level component.
Yeah. Mr. Castile, just briefly,
Yes, Dr. Plummer.
I felt like that was a question. I didn't hear a question from you, Ms. Holloway, but
It was a
okay.
question.
Okay. So yeah, that's accurate. I think that over a period of decades, boards and the department have worked to try to put in place policy to change an outcome in a positive direction, and that's worked. I mean, One of the items that's been called out is the movement in the graduation rate. I mean, there was a policy called out, it moved the graduation rate. But what we also know to be true right now is about a third of students in the state of Louisiana are graduating proficient in core subject areas. And you know, we believe that that is career and college readiness, being able to read and do math. We know that we have some schools that are working with the most challenged communities and populations, and they aren't necessarily rewarded to do that work. And so we are trying to incentivize that as well. When we look at the success on a nationally recognized indicator, that's essentially way too low, whether it's work keys or ACT or SAT. And so we feel like this will also highlight that. But I think in the long term, I do think that this will be a game changer for the state, because more students will be graduating high school proficient in their core content areas. Certainly, school systems will have to adapt and adjust in the ways in which they serve students in those key areas like algebra, geometry, biology, civics, and then the English subjects. But I think at the end of the day, we'll have students graduating high school more proficiently. I think that at the end of the day, we'll have a significant expansion in the number of work-based learning opportunities that happen across the state. And so I think, too, that's why the tracking component is so important, and coming back to the board to look at the data annually is so important. So if there is a need to make a shift, we can make the shift. But these numbers aren't acceptable. I mean, it was mentioned earlier, we're 47th in U.S. News. I mean, that's because that's a combination of higher ed and K-12. If you look at K-12 alone, we're 40th. But that's not good enough. We're trying to now get in the 30s, and these numbers aren't acceptable, and so we have to change the structure so that we can get a different outcome. But I agree with you. I think historically boards and the agency have done their best to move numbers, and they have moved. But it's just time now to raise that bar again, set a higher expectation, and meet that new mark.
Thank you, Chair Conrad. I just wanted to make it clear about the delay. I'm asking for August. I don't want this indefinite. It's just a review, especially the high school is where the focus is. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Anyone else? Was that a motion, or was that a request?
Yeah, it's a request, it's a motion, but I know it's not going to go anywhere. But I make a motion that we delay until August to work on the high school part.
Okay, do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion to delay till August, and it's seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? What's that? Objection. Yeah, we have an objection. So no discussion on the motion. So all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. Motion fails. So now we return to the original motion as amended for revisions to Bulletin 111. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing no further discussion, is there any objection to that motion? Hearing no objection, the motion passes. Thank you all. So now at this time, we'll revert to the original agenda.
Okay. Your next item is on page 43, item.
Excuse me, we have a, what's that? Oh, I'm so sorry, yeah, I forgot. Dr. Clark.
Good morning to everybody. I am Dr. Sharon Clark, and I am a school leader in New Orleans at this time. Listening to your concerns, I do mirror a lot of the concerns that I've heard. I have actually spoken to many leaders across the city. Part of the reason, I'm sorry, I'm battling sinuses, allergies. Part of the reason I wanted to be on Bessie is to make sure there was an educator's voice on the board, and to make sure when we make decisions, the decisions are made, I'm sorry, with children in mind at all times. I have asked the department to make sure that they commit to going back within a year and looking at the plan making sure I have concerns about the weights. I have concerns about the students who are not in the accountability plan. And I also have concerns that my school too, will also be affected by the plan. But we also must move forward because there isn't a perfect plan at this time. So I'm asking that we are committed as a board and as LDOE. I am so sorry about this. That we do go back and we are open to amendments and making corrections and changing things as we go, especially after the first year of data, once we look at the simulations and they come through. But we do have to get started somewhere at this time. So at this time, I am going to ask that we first look at, I want to move to amend section 1705 of the proposed policy presented, that we make sure that we add in that we recognize schools in the 90th percentile for growth in the reading, ELA, math, science, and social studies. Presently, it's at the 99th percentile, so I'm asking that we move to the 90th percentile. So I am moving to make that motion at this time.
Okay, does everyone understand? Do we have a second, first of all? We have a second.
Thank you. And I have water, so this is horrible.
Okay, does everyone understand can you
Mr. Appel,
You want to do it,
yeah, I
Dr.
just want
Bumley?
to share
Okay.
that this is certainly something that is doable by the department. Dr. Clark is just simply asking that as we consider recognition for schools, that we expand that to schools at the 90th percentile and above on some of the recognition that we do, not just the 99th percentile. So that's certainly something that we can handle as an agency and would certainly increase celebrations.
Does that make it clear?
Do we need to see this policy at the board meeting tomorrow?
Yes, and I actually have it already.
Okay.
Okay. Did you have a question?
Yes.
So are we also asking that we use the data that we received this school year with the new model and make any adjustments as needed at the end of the year?
So this would start with the new model instead of right now for 24-25, it's at the 99th percentile. So when the new model comes out for 25-26, it would be at the 90th percentile to show ranking, which would actually include more schools because at the end of the day, the efforts need to be celebrated of what we do in our schools. And this would now increase probably from about 10 schools to probably more than 100 schools.
Okay, anybody else? Yes.
Yes, I think, Dr. Bromley, can you answer this? There are some leaders asking if the school performance scale will freeze until this formula goes into place.
Yes, ma'am. So that was in the policy that because the thought was let's go ahead and start working towards what the vision is of growing every student, identifying those students in the lower achievement levels, providing tutoring, additional support, going and working with community and business partners. And so there is a freeze of the current system, letter grades, in the current system as we move towards the new system.
Good, thank you. There you go. All right, perfect.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I join my colleagues and the public in general, too, in recognizing that it's not a perfect system. I don't know where we're going to find a perfect system. But I have a sensitivity as well that I'd like to address. So I'd like to make a motion to request that LDOE consult with the STAR task force. So this is
Wait, could I interrupt you? We still have a motion that's
I think
active.
I need a vote.
We need a vote on that motion.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Getting ahead of myself here, apologize.
Does anyone have any opposition to Dr. Clark's motion? Hearing none, the motion stands adopted. Now, go ahead.
Wait, I have another motion. I wasn't
Oh,
finished.
wait a minute.
I am also moving that we amend, and this is horrible, amend section 1715 of the policy to make sure that, to be transparent on the school report card, that we not only show the school score, we also show the school's growth score, so that we can show that the effort that educators are making with all kids across the state of Louisiana. And a parent needs to understand that while I may still be a C because I haven't met proficiency or a D, but my growth could actually be an A in the effort to make sure that we are doing the work in our schools. So I'm asking that we add that onto our school report card without limitation, and that would amend that subsection C.
Dr. Brumley?
I just want to ask Dr. Clark if she would be agreeable to not just allowing for that growth score, but for the other categories as well. so that we would
Yes.
have a proficiency score and we would have
Yes.
a Thrive score, so we could do all three?
Yes.
Okay, as sub-scores.
Well, I feel like the boss right now, yes.
Okay, so you're modifying your motion that all scores show up on the report card, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Mellerin, did you second that? I will. She seconded.
Okay, so we're just going
So-
to take those together.
Is there any objection to the second motion? No objection, the motion stands adopted. Now, Mr. Morris.
Wait, let me see if I have anything.
You got any more?
No, I'm done.
Thank you for that, Dr. Clark. Yeah, so I think everyone knows that I've been an advocate to address the attendance issue in our state. The average truancy rate in our state right now is something around 45%. And we all know that we have to not only have quality educators in our classrooms, but we have to have the students in the classrooms. And so thanks Superintendent Brumley and his team for establishing the STAR task force that will address that issue, helping us to understand the root causes and also some of the solves. But part of that, from my own personal experience, I know that these hands-on learning opportunities in the school add a lot of value. Particularly, my experience has been from the middle school. And I don't want to lose sight of that. So my motion is to request that LDOE consult with the STAR task force and bring back recommendations at the appropriate time to consider how Bessie and LDOE can support student attendance and engagement through career exploration and through opportunities for enrichment and extracurricular activities.
Do we have a second for the motion? Ms. Champagne seconds. Does any questions on the motion down there? No questions? Oh, you got a question? You're waving your finger.
I am the committee chair for that. Our next meeting is June 21st, if anybody would like to attend that meeting with us.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any objection to the motion? No objection heard. The motion stands adopted. Anything else before we move on? Okay, so now we're going to revert to the original agenda.
Your next item is on page 43, item 3.1, consideration of the authorization of course providers for the Course Choice Program and reauthorization of successful course choice providers. The recommendation is to approve as outlined.
You want to,
That information's in your packet. Recommend approval.
any questions?
Motion.
We need a motion, I'm sorry, to adopt this. Mr. Morris moves, and Mr. Hollis seconds. Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, the motion stands adopted.
Your next item is on page 45, item 3.2, consideration of the legislative auditor report regarding the LDOE risk-based monitoring of special education services and an update report regarding special education key performance indicators, KPIs. The recommendation is to receive the report.
Okay, we have a recommendation received. Ms. Champagne moves, and Mr. Hollis seconds. You going to go with it?
Yes, sir. This will run quiet a little bit. Thank you, Mr. Appel. So to move from one sensitive item to another sensitive item where we have to do better as an agency and as a state is working to ensure students with disabilities, students with exceptionalities get the supports that they need. We also have to make sure that we're providing families with the options they need in order to best support their children. So I appreciate everyone here today passionate about this particular piece. We continue to look at continuous improvement in this space. We acknowledge that for a long time there has been opportunity for this to be better, and we are working towards that. While things are not perfect, we are working, again, on continuous improvement. We appreciate the push from the families that are in the audience today. Meredith Jordan, who is our Executive Director for Diverse Learners, as well as Angela Randall, who oversees monitoring at the agency, not just with special education, but more broadly, are going to make this particular report because it is twofold. One, the presentation is related to the audit from the legislative auditor around monitoring of special education services in schools. And two, it also shares some of the goals for which we're striving in working with our students with disabilities, students with exceptionalities. So Ms. Jordan and Ms. Randall, you make the presentation here, if you don't mind.
Great. Thank you all for the opportunity this morning. Good morning. I'm Meredith Jordan, Executive Director for Diverse Learners here at the department. At this time, myself and Angela Randall are going to provide an update on the legislative audit for risk-based monitoring of special education services in our state. As you know, I oversee our statewide strategy for improving outcomes for students with disabilities in our state. I work really closely with Ms. Randall, who is also here with me as the Executive Director for statewide monitoring, including our special education program monitoring. She actually drove in from conducting on-site monitoring this week to join us and will leave us and return to the field to do additional monitoring as well. She's been a former special education supervisor as well and at the department since 2003. With her hand in this work, and so I know she's going to also provide some invaluable historical knowledge and expertise with me this morning. We work very closely day to day around monitoring compliance needs across our state, supporting our educational leaders around compliance and what are those high area needs that we see. And so we've been working hand in hand with this audit together since November of 2022. The scope of this particular audit includes academic years 2015 to 2016 through 2021 to 2022, which I'll note and we shared with the auditors during these years, there are several notable natural disasters. We had the pandemic during this time. So those two particular events both greatly impacted and impeded the agency's ability to conduct on-site monitoring, and in lieu did more desk reviews or self-assessment reviews during that time period. Additionally, this audit specifically covered the evaluation of our risk-based monitoring of special education services. So Louisiana is required to have a comprehensive system of general supervision and oversight for special education, of which integrated monitoring is one component there. And this really, this particular audit really honed in and gave a microscope view on our risk-based monitoring, which is part of a tiered process of monitoring. So one integral piece of what we do and how we monitor special education. So at the highest sort of global view, the Office of Special Education Programs, or OSIP, requires states to provide for school system monitoring of special education and says that states design a reasonable system for program oversight and monitoring. And thus far, we have not had any indication from OSIP that our system falls short of that expectation. But of course, as Dr. Brumley mentioned, we really approached this with an improvement mindset and certainly always look to make improvements and work alongside our stakeholders to do just that. As you know, over the years, OSIP will release guidance or make suggestions to states around particular shifts or particular changes that they would like to see happen. And so just to provide a background, we sort of went back and created a timeline on how we arrived at the current risk-based monitoring, how this system was developed, and pulled together this timeline back from 2016, which is when that shift to risk-based monitoring happened, really in response to OSIP wanting states to go to more risk-based. And so as you'll see here, it was a 7-month process that included stakeholder engagement. There was a work group that developed this process, and of course our state special education panel at the time weighed in and resulted in the current monitoring policy and procedure that we have in our state today. Angela would have also served on that work group, and I know she'll provide a little bit more insight on the engagement and the resulting process, maybe a little bit about folks who were really involved as stakeholders. And so at this time, as I turn over the next slide to Angela, if she has anything she wants to add here about this, the makeup of this group, feel free to do that.
Hi, I'm Angela Randall, the Director of Statewide Monitoring. I was actually a member of this Stakeholder Engagement Committee back in April of 2016. It was a diverse group of stakeholders. It was comprised of internal and external stakeholders. We also had a parent representative on the stakeholder engagement panel, along with a BESI member at the time. And so during that meeting, that is where we determined that we would move from a cyclical, one-size-fits-all cyclical form of monitoring to a risk-based monitoring. And we also identified those areas of risk that we would compare or analyze the students with disability subgroup against in order to rank them for monitoring support. Okay, as we move into the next section of this report, you'll notice that there are 5 results, and Meredith and I are going to take time to walk you through each of those 5 results. The 5 overarching results that you see in this report is basically what this 68 typed page legislative audit report boils down to. As Meredith said, it was a long and arduous process. We've been working with Mr. Wagasback's team since November of 2022, and I feel like it would be disingenuous of me if I did not tell you what I know and what I've learned about this report and these results before just jumping into that. I think I owe that to you. So before I go into result number 1, I think it's important to understand as we go into this section of the report that these are results and not findings. And there is a difference. A result is more so a recommendation for improvement. So this is where the auditors has said to the state, we've looked at your processes and procedures and we feel like you should be doing something better or more efficiently. A finding is a horse of a different color. A finding is basically a citation or a violation. The state has done something that is in opposition to a particular standard or component of the law. So as we go through these results, we want you to know at a high level that these are not findings or violations against the state's monitoring procedures. These are recommendations for improvement based on observations of the auditor's engagement with our processes. The second thing that I want to say about this report is syntax and semantics matter in a public-facing report. There are many different ways that we can convey information, and sometimes if that information is not conveyed in a particular way, in a public-facing report, it could take months to recover from that. Or you could find yourself sitting at a table like this trying to explain what it says. So as we go through the results, what we feel would be beneficial is that we will read you what the report says, and then we will explain to you what we believe or know that it exactly that means. The third thing that I want to say about the results before we get into it, and Meredith has touched on that already, is that in Louisiana, we operate a 3-pronged monitoring process. What this report elevates is the risk-based piece of the 3-part model. So by reading this report, you don't get any idea that risk-based works in concert with 2 other kinds of monitoring at the state. We have shared that information with the Legislative Auditor's Office, and they chose to eliminate how we monitor in 2 out of the 3 areas of monitoring support. So also keep it in mind as we talk about these things, this is one part of the monitoring model that we implement in Louisiana. So with that, we can go into result number 1. All right. So result number 1 reads, the LDOE did not conduct a desk or an on-site review for 43 or 43% of 100 school systems for at least 7 years, academic years between 2015-16 and 2020-21. And the department's response, our management response, says that we concur with that. To date, our response is that the department has provided an on-site monitoring or a desk audit to each of the school systems that were highlighted in this report as not having received. So at this point in 2024, we're at 100% of what they looked at in the sample. However, we were unable to submit any evidences of monitoring beyond the year of 2021, 2022. I need to say one more thing about this 43% because this may be one of 2 results that really got a lot of attention. And the reason that it's received a lot of attention is because you see a large glaring percentage of what it appears that the department did not do. So when we look at the 43%, this is not 43% of the state of Louisiana. This is 43% of a sample of 100 school systems that were selected over a 7-year period. This 43% also does not represent 43% of each of the 7 years. It's 43% over 7 years. So if you look at the average of that, we're actually talking about around 6 school systems over the 7-year period that may have not received the on-site or the desk review for the purposes of this audit. So I wanted you to understand what that 43 represented. On the flip side of that 43, it also means that 57% of school systems did receive the on-site and the desk review, but you would not see that written out in the legislative auditor's report. Just closing out, those 43 school systems, they have been resolved with an on-site or a desk audit. And the big theme of this audit and these results is that we need to be doing more and we need to be doing it better. And we do need to do more and do better. We've had some capacity issues that Meredith will talk about that we've addressed. So we feel confident that moving forward that we'll be able to increase our capacity to put more boots on the ground to conduct on-site monitoring and desk audits.
So the second result really covers the next real big thing. So the auditors really liked the quality of the desk and the on-site monitoring, wanted more of that. Results two talks about the capacity, right? Having the staff and how staffing has impacted the ability to do desk and on-site those processes. So this result indicated that LDOE decreased the number of employees dedicated to special education from fiscal years 2012 to 2019 and entered into a consent judgment in Orleans, both resulting in capacity issues for on-site monitoring. Our response was that we absolutely agree with that, and capacity is an issue in terms of being able to have the staff needed to go out and do desk and on-site, to do more than what we're currently doing. The LDOE agreed, and while the legislative budget cuts that resulted in the reduction of staff prior to, of course, the current administration, the department proactively requested 6 additional full-time staff during this past legislative budget request, was granted those 6 positions, and that'll be dedicated exclusively to special education monitoring. So both doubling that team and doubling the amount of IDEA funding that we're going to be investing in special education monitoring to ensure compliance. So I'm happy that, that this particular result was tied to the decreased numbers or the lower numbers than what was desired in terms of desk. And if nothing else speaks, this particular chart certainly speaks to this. This was information we worked alongside the auditors to provide them. This is straight from the report. And certainly this graph shows the overarching theme of that impact of the staff cut that you see in 2012, that drastic reduction there in special education staff.
Of course, due to the scope of the audit, some of our recent additions, like our special education ombudsman, which the agency repurposed a position, we weren't awarded a new position, but found that position, repurposed that position. Those particular add-ons recently to special education staff, of course, aren't included in this particular chart. But we're happy that we'll begin to show this chart going in the other direction with the increase of the 6 additional IDA monitoring staff. And I'm going to turn it back over to Angela for the next result.
Okay, result number 3. I don't know if these glasses are working or not today. Result number 3, the LDOE's process to select students during a desk or an on-site review does not ensure it monitors all applicable federal and state law requirements listed on the monitoring protocol. This is what the auditor stated, and the LDOE's response is that we partially concur with that. I have a lot to say about this one in particular, and I've had lots of conversations with the audit team about this one. And what I'll say is, at a surface level, it's difficult to understand this work at a deeper level. As a monitor who doesn't have the background and experience in the area of special education. So we use a monitoring protocol. We have a tool that we've developed. It's a standardized document, and there's a number of questions across that document. And we apply that document to every student file that we review, and we keep it. And so that particular protocol has every core area of special education that we feel we could apply to monitoring a student or a student file. It goes from early childhood all the way to high school transition and everything in between. And so at the time that I believe that the auditors used this checklist to compare it to the files because they looked behind what we did, I don't believe that they understood that when a not applicable was checked on that checklist, that it did not mean that we overlooked a standard or didn't apply it to a child. We don't have the resources or the capacity to create a checklist for every circumstance, so we use one. So just to give you a very plain and simple example, if I were monitoring the file of an early childhood student, a 4 or 5-year-old student, then high school transition questions at the bottom of that protocol would not be applicable to that child. Or if there were a question about whether the child had a math goal in place, well, if the child did not have an area of concern or had been diagnosed with having or needing support in the area of math, then that would be not applicable because it wouldn't apply to that child's circumstance. So this particular result heavily came about because we have monitors who are looking at checklists against files, and they're seeing yeses, maybe on all of them sometimes, or no's, and not applicables. And so at times when they saw that we didn't address a question, it was assumed that we did not apply that standard to the student. But in many cases, in many instances, the standard didn't need to be applied.
And just to add to that, if you are monitoring, for example, in an elementary school, you would have a set of records that the high school indicators, or for example, April Dunn, some of those particular items on the protocol would not have applied to a set of students, for example, at an elementary school. So moving on to result 4, this result focused on policy and procedure for informal removals of students with disabilities. LDOE agrees that exclusionary discipline, informal removals of these students may impact their ability to benefit from high-quality teaching and learning, and we want all of our children, as we heard earlier this morning in discussion, to benefit from high-quality teaching and learning. The auditors provided some example guidance in the appendices from another state. We've also provided guidance documents about exclusionary discipline, some of the documents that OSIP released about a year ago. Several documents we've created and released around attendance, positive behavior supports. So we've released guidance as the example. One of the examples is that was included as an appendices. But because informal removals aren't defined in IDA, that's not a definition that you find in regs anywhere. It presents a challenge, not one that we don't believe we can take a look at and work alongside our state special education panel around, but it does leave a lot up to states, and to our knowledge, the auditors didn't find any states that have adopted any policy around this, but is certainly something that we want to take a look at, is what is being done around policy for informal removals. If you look at the example, they include certain examples around removing students from assemblies, moving children to different learning spaces during the day, all of which we would have to get self-reported right now from our school systems, or figure out a way to even collect or track that. And I'll say current Bulletin 1706, when you start talking about discipline removals for students with disabilities, our policy says that removals have to be considered when IEP teams are looking at discipline decisions and potentially changing placement. What we could do is also take a look at current policy and see how we can better clarify that, because when we look at that and we say removal should be, it doesn't say informal, it doesn't say formal, it says removal. And so when you're talking about changing placement for a student, we should consider all of the times, all of the ways in which that child has been removed from a learning setting, and how that's impacting the students. So all of that to say, we partially concurred with this one as well. Just to say that we need to work alongside our special education panel to really define this, look to OSIP for additional guidance, look to other states around specific policy. How do you define an informal removal? How do you collect that, track it? All of those may present some challenges, but not something that, that we're willing to take a look at. We plan to also take an approach that builds capacity around functional behavior assessments, behavior intervention plans, and providing and building capacity of educators on how to support students with staying in the classroom where they can get that highest quality teaching and learning. And then the last result was around following federal regulations when calculating significant disproportionality relating to discipline. You'll see we partially concurred with this recommendation because the calculations that the auditors recreated for us were a little bit unclear. They mentioned 1 year of data in this section, but we know for significant disproportionality, you have to look at 3 years of data to make those determinations. You have alternate risk ratios used when the comparison group, so you're calculating the risk of a certain group of students to be disciplined more, right, or removed in certain ways more than other students or other subgroups of students. And so risk ratios are used when that comparison group is 0, when you don't have another group or another race to compare to. And so we also know that OSIP really, yes, we should, and we are calculating now risk ratios, but OSIP does tell you be cautious because those small numbers are very volatile. You just have to really look into the data and look at those student groups and the comparisons before you make that determination in the 3rd year and say, yes, this school or this system has significant disproportionality. Also, just a reminder here, we mentioned the discipline data included in this particular scope did include data from the pandemic year, which we know impacted discipline data. Students, some of those students were virtual, and so we know that in that particular year, it made us look really great and like we had solved problems around discipline, when in fact, those students for much of that year and the end of that year and the following year may not have been in a classroom setting. So I can assure you that we're actually using a nationally developed tool that does this calculation these very complex calculations for us. In closing, just want to conclude saying our teams are dedicated to improving supports for these students across the state. Our special education team, our monitoring team members, we were recently applied and were accepted among a couple of other states to attend a monitoring policy writing workshop, which we're really excited about, especially on the heels of this, where we will be able to take these results, talk about the challenges, hear about challenges that other states are facing around this as well, see what types of policy changes that may be recommended to us as a state, bring those back to our state, bring that back to our state panel, and make any improvements suggested along with those that we've talked about here. And we will also be placing this item on our state panel agenda coming up this summer as well.
If I may, I just wanted to ask Ms. Champagne, the status of selecting the members of the Special Education Advisory Panel. I know you and Ms. Jordan have been working on that. Just want to see if you would like to share an update on that.
Sure. Thank you, Superintendent. Well, thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to sit on this very important instrumental committee. I look forward to it. I'd like to thank Meredith for all the hard work she and the department are doing on this committee. We had over 100 applications to sit on SEEP, which I think is awesome. It's wonderful. The first phase, we appointed a 4-member committee. The first phase was to screen the applications to see who really met the criteria and who may not have. The second phase was to do some interviews, which is complete, and we expect to make a recommendation to the superintendent within the next week. And our next meeting was scheduled for June 19th. However, that is a holiday, so we have moved it to July 31st. So we're working hard, and I really thank Meredith for all her hard work.
And thank you for working on that, too.
Okay, do we have any, President Morris?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. Can you go back to the slide that showed the graph? I didn't see the slide number. Yeah, I want to make sure I have the right interpretation. So is the right interpretation that the 82 and the 27 differential, so that's 55. Does that mean that there were 55 less staff members now than there were previously if we had projected out over time? Is that the right interpretation?
Yes, with at least some coding to IDA.
So there's a reduction of 55 staff members that would have been dedicated to do this work. Is that the right interpretation?
I think those are, Mr. Morris, those are total employees. So, for instance, and Meredith, correct me if I'm wrong, but in 2012, you had 91 total employees dedicated to special ed. And in 2013, that number was reduced to 55 total employees. And then you see that number trend downward all the way through 2019. And in 2019, we stabilized that number and then have since made the request for the 6 additional monitors that we actually received the TO for, the position and the funding. So that number for the next year will go up to 33. Is that accurate? Okay.
Yeah. So the delta is really 64 then, right? 91 minus 27, right? So there's been a reduction of 64 staff members full-time over that period of time. Okay. And so we're adding 6 new staff members. I appreciate the budget constraints and so forth. I'd like some appreciation for how we landed on 6. And then also, could you help me a little bit with what those, little detail around what those 6 new employees will be doing?
Yeah. The 6 new employees will be housed in the Special Education Monitoring Unit. They will be at an Education Program Consultant 3 level, so that will give them the opportunity to work alongside the current monitors that we have. So they'll be full-time permanent positions, and they'll be picking up an increased percentage of on-site monitoring, and they'll also be responsible for desk audits when they're not on-site.
Okay, so some weighted blend of on-site work and then desk work.
They'll have both. So we monitor on a quarterly basis. So each quarter, when the monitoring schedule goes out, they will have a certain number of on-sites that they need to conduct and close out within that quarter. And then when they're in the office, at the time that they have to report back on what they learned on site, they'll also pick up desk audits at the same time.
Okay. Can you go to your slide for result number 3?
Mr. Morris, is it okay if I make a comment on this slide before we move on? If we could go back. I mean, this is really the crux of the issue. Like, this is the slide that shows the complication. You know, the department had 91 individuals full-time monitoring, and then because of budget or whatever, I don't know, we weren't here, a decision was made to reduce that. And so then you've seen a downward trend of employees. And so that is, to me, this is the reason for which we are here. And this is the reason that we've made the request for the additional monitors. But I think so much of all of the results go back to this chart and the fact that there was that reduction. And, I mean, it was probably for good reason or necessity. I don't know, but I'm just saying I think that this is root cause of the challenge.
Thank you for that. I agree. Could we look at result number 3? Yeah. Can you explain that to me? I don't really understand. Can you give me an example, that's particularly around selecting students, the process to select students? Can you give me an example of that? What are we talking about here so I understand it?
DOE's process to select students during a desk or on-site review does not ensure it monitors all applicable federal and state requirements. If I were to have a monitoring protocol and I were auditing Meredith's file, I would have in front of me Meredith's school folder, her file, which would have hopefully a picture of her special education programming at the school. And for whatever reason, the school came up to be monitored. Meredith was either randomly selected or her file was selected for a particular reason. Across this checklist, there are citations, indicators, and supporting evidence. So on this checklist, in column 1, there's a standard. It's very black and white. It comes straight from the law. Did the student have an IEP that was updated at least once annually? Was the student's evaluation, was the student reevaluated within on a triennial cycle, once every 3 years? Does the student's goal include a method for, was it measurable, or whatever it is? So there's a standard that came directly from the IDEA law. And then in the center of that checklist, we give our monitors examples of the kinds of evidence that you need to see in order to be able to validate, yes, I saw that for Meredith. No, I did not. So there's a list of things that are law, and then there's examples of things that you can look at to be able to make a verification of compliance. And then in the next column, there is the citation. So if you say no to it, it's directly linked to this is a violation of 300.506 certified federal regulation. All right? So Meredith is a 4-year-old student.
Well, basically, it's a gap analysis, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So Meredith is 4 years old, and so we're going down, and we've gotten to the section on high school transition. Mm-hmm. Does Meredith have a high school transition plan that's in place that will see her to progress in the general class curriculum and when she graduates from school and beyond? We say NA to that because Meredith just made it to kindergarten, and at some point, she's going to have a high school transition plan if she doesn't age out or exits before that time. So what I'm saying is that when we're not with the monitors and they pick up these protocols, they expect that there'll be a yes or a no for each of these questions, and some of these questions don't apply to the circumstance.
Okay, so it's just alignment on the rubric is what I'm hearing, yes, as it applies to an individual student.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I just have one more question. When would we expect an update on implementation of the follow-ups from the audit?
I would ask that we would have it till we've discussed with SEEP as well.
right? So we would like to bring recommendations to SEEP, and then we could follow up with the board after that.
So that would be August then, is that right?
Once
And
we
an
get the
update on
position- And an update on positions. We're in the process of writing job descriptions for the positions, and we need to interview and get some people on board. So it would take probably at least another month before we can get
Okay,
everything
so
set up
August
with
sounds
positions.
right then. Yep. When do these new 6 people start?
When are they starting? We just found out on Friday that we can advertise for those positions. So once we advertise, they'll probably advertise for 2 weeks, and then we'll get started with the hiring process.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
One other statement, Mr. Morris, too. On the coding, those are coded to IDA, not just specifically for monitoring. Just want to clarify that.
Ms. Holloway?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, ladies. That made my heart happy. To hear the action plan, the clarifications. And of course, the question I had to say is, how can Bessie support? And we're hearing some conversations here. And, but before I move forward, I want to take a personal comment here with Dr. Charlie Michelle. Yes, the expert in special ed. It was my peer in Lafourche. Thank you for being here. He's the guru. Thank you for teaching me all that I know in the SPED area. I appreciate that. Okay. But anyway, thank you. I appreciate that. So I had top 3 questions from reading this whole document. And you answered thank you for that. And the formal follow-up, thank you, Ronnie, because that's important that we hear that. Because you're looking at federal mandates here, state mandates, and it's a lot of work. It's very challenging. The area, and I knew about New Orleans, but the question I had about the special ed funding, Dr. Brumley, maybe you, but I know in the document it cited like I'm saying 100, I can't remember the numbers, about how they were coded under IDEA. Has that been fixed? And they didn't have a job description. Can you talk to that?
We actually implemented an even more intense process alongside our fiscal and HR teams since I've been here to make sure we're doing those time and effort statements multiple times a year. So supervisors are having conversations with their staff about how much time they're spending to support special education. As you know, Ms. Holloway, the support that it takes, and for me, all the folks sitting on this side of this room, to administer special education programs across our state. There's not a department in our agency that I don't touch and meet with weekly and talk about our strategy and support that they provide. There were 6 individuals or positions in the report that the auditor said we're not real sure they should be coded to IDEA. I am willing to look at those if I know who. We don't know, we asked for that information, who they are, so we could review job descriptions, and we have not received that information yet. Because to your point, if there's something that should be coded differently, or maybe we want to fix it, is what I'm saying. But we don't have who those 6 individuals are and who we should be looking at according to the auditors. But we are paying attention to who's coded, to time and effort, and making sure that folks are properly coded to this document. And I'll give you an example. So if you have for example, a data analyst or a financial analyst who is working on special education, there could be a job description, right, that we're using for a data analyst or a finance analyst who's working on this work and helping us administer programs, but special education may not be in their job description. That's something we can look at and fix, but that's an example of where the job description may not say this person administers special education in the state, but their work around supporting our finance, supporting our data analysis, supports that pay being issued from IDEA.
Okay.
Also, it's important, I just want to add on to what Meredith said, this was back from 2015 to 2021. So because they said if we give names of people who we interview, they'll stop talking to us, is what the auditor said to us. They wouldn't give us any names, so we couldn't track it. And additionally, we don't know if those employees are even still with the agency or not. We don't have any information about it.
Sure, what matters is that you're making effort. I appreciate that. And we know that this is our second audit. The first one was back in September of '23. Are you aware if there is a third or fourth coming? Has there been conversation, Dr. Brumley?
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that-
So the first was around dispute resolution, and that was a series of policy shifts that you've seen. This one is around monitoring, so it's prompting some of the shifts that we'll make. And the next is around seclusion and restraint in the schools. So that's the, I think, the final one that they're going to be working through.
So if you have the heads up, then evidently, you're also working on that, trying to think ahead, right? Okay, thank you. I have a question here, and I just need clarity and understanding why, because there were a lot of questions asked of me in regards to helping families. And there was a letter that was sent out by Matthew Johnson, the Chief Strategy Officer, in regards to the response to the LL audit and assessing the performance of its current SPED partners to ensure we are doing everything we can for Louisiana SPED students and families. This process includes evaluating the past performance and the future capacities of helping families, as well as assessing other organizations' ability to successfully partner with LDOE. Please help me understand how this outside group affects the audit, because they're not part of the audit. I didn't see any deficiencies with this group. And I have another question. Okay.
So we think that services for students with exceptionalities has to improve across the board. And we think the way in which we serve families has to improve across the board. And I don't think that's limited to one audit or 3 audits. I just think it's part of the philosophy of what we're trying to do. And so as a result of the audit and other internal work, we are exploring partners that we have in this space to make sure that for the funds that are being issued, that we are receiving the services that we feel are appropriate, and that families are receiving the support that they feel are appropriate. So there's nothing to say that that particular vendor would not continue to receive financial support, but it's just we want to work through a process to evaluate those things.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you work with them directly to help or enhance their productivity?
I think that's a Meredith question.
Yeah, so I have a part-time employee on my team who helps to manage that partnership, work with the contracting work, gather reporting from them, data on their deliverables as part of that allocated funding. We do try to also meet monthly. I always ask them to share with me what are the parent concerns that you're hearing, update them on LDOE initiatives that we need their help getting out. Certainly, want to make sure as a result of all parent, all stakeholder engagement that we're improving our outreach efforts and making sure we're getting information to parents and families, helping them through all of these partnerships, resolve their disputes, resolve their disagreements alongside their school systems. And we don't have a family support engagement team. We've done things as an agency in addition to my part-time person, right? So as a result of that first audit, we also hired Chastity, who I know you all have seen some of those very positive emails and things coming through. So we definitely know that as a result of some of these engagements that we're following the recommendations of the audit, including the first one, in looking at how we're supporting families, how we're doing family outreach, making sure that families feel supported and get their disagreements and their disputes resolved in the least adversarial manner as possible.
Well,
And that
I was
means
going to
getting
ask you about
information to them.
support, because you can't handle all these things
Right.
on your own. It's huge. As people are hearing the conversations today, it's a huge department. Are you aware of any other contractors received this letter? Who else works within your area? Mr. Johnson, did you send, I don't know, who needs to answer? Dr.
Yeah, I'll
Brown?
answer that. No, we are looking at all services that are
So
provided.
you're saying a letter went out to all the agencies that service?
I'm not aware of that, but we are looking at all services. I mean, I'll tell you in regards to families helping families, I know Mary is here, she knows this as well. And your mentor, Dr. Michelle is here for
That's
Families
why
Helping
we
Families.
know about family helping families.
Right, your mentor. Although I didn't know, did you say you taught her everything or you didn't teach her everything? Oh. Okay, gotcha. No, whenever I was first appointed to the role, the previous administration had essentially made the decision to cut the contract with Families Helping Families. And it's because they weren't satisfied with the results they were receiving. And one of the first decisions I made was to stay that and to prevent that from happening because I wanted to make sure that we had a good evaluation over a period of time. And so, that was one of the first actions I took was to not cut the Families Helping Families and not move to a different family support group. But I think as we've gone through all of this, I think it certainly does warrant us exploring the services that Families Helping Families provides, as well as are there other partners out there that could be supportive of the work, either maybe alongside them or otherwise. And so that's where that is.
It's good. It's
and
good.
Certainly.
It's a good report. And I want you to know, I happened to be on that committee when the funds were cut at that time on seat. And then with you bringing it back, and that's commendable. Thank you. One last question, a recommendation I'd like to make is that when we receive audits, no matter what they are, if the superintendent could send us a notice that an audit has been received. If you, I don't know.
Well, happy to do that, but I believe my assumption was that it goes to the Bessie office as well, and so, I mean, I think it goes there as well. So, but I'm happy to send that.
And it's because before the public, and the public lets us know, it's just the protection of.
Happy to do that.
Yeah, please do. And I don't know I can't say what happened, but I know that we didn't receive it. Thank you. Thank you.
You finished? Thank you.
And on all of this, look, I mean, and you'll hear from the parents, and they're passionate, and you're going to hear that, and I appreciate that. But we are continuing to work to make this better. Some of these policies weren't opened up in 2 decades.
Correct.
Changes.
You are correct. It's good. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have any comments or questions? Anybody? All righty, well, thank you all. We do have a number of parents that wish to speak. Jody Rollins, in support of recommendations. Charles Michel, in support of recommendations. Catherine Hart, support of recommendations. Is that 4? No. Mary Jacob, in support of recommendations. And again, I ask you all to keep to 2 minutes.
Catherine had to leave, so Mary, you might.
Okay. Do we have a substitute? I have Christopher Rowe also. Is he here? You want to come on down? And then while they're coming down, let me read these in real quickly. This is in support of recommendations, those who do not wish to speak. Jackie Pierce, Mimi Webb. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Mimi is in opposition. Is this one? Yeah, opposition. Vivian Webb is also in opposition. Angel McGee is in opposition. Nicole Flores is in opposition. And Nicole Dijon, I may have pronounced that wrong, Dijon, in opposition. Okay? You want to start on this end?
Thank you. Is this on? Okay.
Just keep it close, because it really doesn't work very well.
First of all, I'm Charlie Michel. I'm the Executive Director of Bioland Families Helping Families for the last 6 years. And during that time, I've had the pleasure of working with Meredith on a lot of these issues that we're talking about. Prior to that, I was the Special Education Director in Lafourche Parish for 11 years. And during that time, I had the pleasure of working with Angela Randall, who helped us tremendously with issues as they were coming up. So I wanted to point that out. I also know that in your office, Dr. Brumley, there's probably some nasty notes about me. John did not like me. It's all good, though. Okay. what I wanted to bring to you is a couple of things about the auditing process. While I've disagreed with the State Department in many things over the past 17 years, one of the things I always try to do was have some solutions or possible solutions to at least consider. And that's what I'd like to offer. First thing I want to say is I don't know that, while 6 is a good number to start off with, I think hopefully after a year you'll revisit that and see if you need more in order to be able to do those audits. Also, hopefully they'll be well-trained and ready to know what a process of an effective audit is. There's nothing more demoralizing than when auditors come into your district and view your files and they don't even know what questions to ask. We're helping them along the way, so we're hoping that's going to happen. Also, I would suggest, based on reading the audit, that a database be created to keep track of who you're auditing and when, so that if ever you need that information, you've got that at your disposal. That way you can support that you are in fact doing it. The monitoring results of all school districts and non-public schools should be made readily available on the LDOE website. And I'd like to see the scope of auditing increase. We never opposed auditing. We were always grateful for any kind of input. But also, IDEA has moved from a quantitative or a check-the-box compliance thing to an effective outcome situation. So my hope is that the monitoring will continue to increase in scope so that outcomes for students with disabilities can be looked at. So if we're talking about a poor graduation rate, it's going down in special ed, perhaps when we're auditing and when we're monitoring, what we should do is be looking at, is that child on Act 833? Has that been considered? If the child's not being successful in math, let's say, and he has a math objective, what has been done? Has there been a meeting? Look at the whole process, not just the folder. Look at the whole child. And also, and I'm almost done, sorry about that. Look at the complaints that are lodged against this, at the State Department, the formal complaints, whether it's mediation or whatever, and maybe figure out a way to incorporate that into the monitoring process so that we can target some of the things and reduce those number of complaints. And I'll talk about how Families Helping Families helps with that process in the next meeting. And I want to say the informal removals that we talked about, it is a huge problem. That is probably one of the biggest things we talk about with families, because school systems are constantly contacting parents to pick up their child because the child can't handle the stress anymore, but they don't put anything in place. That does, while it is not an IDEA, Meredith is absolutely right, the removal does trigger the 10-day FAPE-free deal, and it triggers the due processes which are included in IDEA. Dr. Brumley, you're 100% right. The reduction in staff is probably 100% of the problem. And that was something that was done by your predecessor for reasons unknown, but it has created many problems which are well known. My concern now is one of his top people was in here today trying to tell us how to fix that which they broke. And whether or not she's on a contract to get paid for that, I find that just a tad suspicious. I do not like the fact you cannot call someone a hero for putting out a fire that they started. And I believe that's what we're seeing with some of this stuff. And the last thing that I want to say is I don't want to be Florida. I want to be the best Louisiana we can be. And this is a mechanism by which we can get to that point. I'm born and bred in Louisiana, and I think my education was just fine. It was in a public school system. I want everybody else to have the opportunity for that, including children with disabilities. I thank y'all for letting me go over my time.
Not a problem. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Jody Rollins. There's so much I need to say, but there's not enough time. First of all, I'm not going to thank anybody up here for this, but I will say you're welcome. On behalf of myself, Dr. Lorene Mayfield, Kathleen Canino, Mary Jacob, Charlie Michelle, and all of the advocates that had to, for years, I've been meeting with him, along with other Bessie members, begging for Dr. Brumley to examine and audit his agency. It didn't have to be this way. It didn't have to be a public audit. And let me explain to you as a business owner how I look at this. Dr. Brumley has created, by not addressing this for years, and I have documentation of all of this if any of you want to see it, not mitigating this liability for our state. That consent decree in Orleans, you could literally put my child and other children's names that I've helped for as a volunteer across the state of Louisiana. Dr. Brumley knew these things. So did Meredith Jordan. I want to read to you a result of what the LDOE's lackadaisical practices have created, as well as the 1706 bulletin changes. So Ms. Jordan does not have a SPED certification. A lot of the requirements to be a SPED director were removed, and I don't remember the year. This is from a PRR. This is Dr. Mary Riley from Bienville Parish. Good afternoon. Can you please take a look at this IEP time chart? I think we should not be creating a new IEP each year. Dr. Mayfield had this in place before I got here. What are your thoughts? That is the basis of how our kids are educated in Louisiana. Dr. Brumley's been aware. As far as the things that Angela Randall and Meredith Jordan are now saying today, I have been in meeting after meeting with these people, Dr. Brumley, Matt Johnson, who actually told me, just because I didn't know, and Hector Linares didn't know, and Kathleen and Mary didn't know, one parent that had ever been interviewed by his department for a dispute, it didn't mean it hadn't happened. That is absurd. If you apply logic and reason to anything coming out of this department's mouth about this, it does not make sense. Dr. Brumley knew, and now our state is open to a lot more scrutiny about federal funds. That the people they're paying out of IDA, it sounds like to me they've been backfilling their general budget with IDA funds. I don't know, but no one can make it make sense. We have no SPED department. Are y'all aware of that? We don't have one. Meanwhile, I'm spending hours of my day showing you, Dr. Brumley, we have test integrity issues. We have no SPED department. We have children who haven't been taught in years. They're getting only data reviews. You knew all of this, and you waited until we begged the legislator to audit y'all. You repeatedly said you cannot enforce, despite my kid's first grade Louisiana standard syllabus saying the executive branch enforces the laws. And when you pull our Constitution, you are automatically a member of that branch. And you didn't do it. You didn't do it.
Ma'am, please,
And
let's,
I have one more thing to say.
please,
I understand.
and wrap up.
I understand. You've created a liability for our state now. I've talked to OSEF too. They do not say it is okay that we don't monitor on site. And we can't even prove it. You don't keep data on that. They told me personally, no, that is not a good thing. They are concerned about that. We have no SEEP because you cleared it, Cade. They're coming in July
let's
and
wrap up
discovery.
the comments, please. Yes, ma'am, next.
Hi.
Yeah, microphone and
Let me-
switch.
See if I can remember the basic rule here, right? I'm Mary Jacob. I'm the Executive Director of Families Helping Families of Greater New Orleans and the Louisiana Parent Training and Information Center, which is the federally funded statewide parent training and information center that is outlined in Part D of IDEA. I'm also a parent of 2 adult daughters with disabilities, and I'm a former member of the LDOE evaluation team. I've been doing this for 30 years, y'all. I have sat on many on-site compliance and focus monitoring teams across Louisiana. This is my 30th year doing this, and I've witnessed many highs and lows in education. Unfortunately, much like the first audit, this audit brought no surprises to me. I personally have been begging the department to do more monitoring. Since COVID, we've seen more LEAs take the position of sue me in IEP meetings rather than do what they're supposed to be doing, because they know parents don't have the financial resources to sue, and they know that y'all not really looking at them. You know, that's been made clear to them that the department is saying we have our autonomy and we can do basically what we want to do. And they literally are doing that. So I just want to give y'all a little bit of a background on how monitoring was done back then so y'all can see how it's changed over the years. Back then there wasn't a big budget for monitoring because the majority of the monitors were LEA employees. And the LEAs would provide these employees to the state to do these monitors outside of their regions that they were in. And it was like a favor. It's like, you do this, the LEA paid for the salary of that person. So what all the state had to do was hire or contract with the monitor leaders. So we had, I think, 6, maybe 8 monitor leaders that was there. And then every FHF contract had
a deliverable that we would sit on those monitoring teams. Our role was to do all the parent interviews and to hold the parent meeting at nighttime that was held for every single monitoring. We would get there on a Sunday night, check into the host hotel, and for the larger districts, we were there until Friday. We were there the entire week. For smaller districts, we probably left by Wednesday, Thursday morning at the latest. We would always meet with the special ed director and the superintendent of the district, and depending on what we was there for, we'd all go through that. And sometimes it was focused on something specific like graduation rates, discipline, things like that. Sometimes it was just compliances, was basically all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. But there was about 8 to 15 people that went on these monitoring sites, depending on how large the district was. Most of the ones I did were rather large ones, and like I said, I'm in the New Orleans area, so everything I monitored was pretty much in the north or the west part of the state. We didn't do anything in our own backyards. They wanted to make sure there was a separation there so that there wasn't any kind of conflict. What we were looking at, which is different from what I'm hearing today with that checklist, is at these parent meetings or the parents would talk to us, they would talk about their concerns. And there was probably about 100 parents that would come to these parents' meetings on average. And their concerns wasn't, because the parents didn't know that the IEP line wasn't the right way or something wasn't written the right way. What they knew was that their kid wasn't learning. Something wasn't going on that they weren't happy about. My child's been having the same reading goals for 3 years, and they're still not learning to read. What does that mean? We would then, if the team, and we debriefed every night, so if the team decided they saw trends there or they seen things that they thought was really red flaggish, we would ask for the child's file. We weren't looking to see, was there a goal? We were looking to see, is there a legitimate current performance where we need to know what is that child's current level of performance, precisely, not he's below average or he's at a second grade level. We need to know exactly where they are because it's the only way you can measure it. Then we're looking at the goal. Is there a measurable goal? Can that goal truly be measured? And you just like the SMART goals, y'all probably know everything about, it's got to be specific, it's got to be measurable, it's got to be attainable, it's got to be relative, and it's got to be timely. Is it measurable? That's where the breakdown is. That's what I don't believe is happening today. We can go through and check off everything. Mary Jacob can go in any district in this state and make every IEP compliant that's not compliant. But if somebody's not making sure that those little pieces are there and kids are really learning, that's what we need to worry about. I believe all of y'all are here because y'all care about kids. That's why I do what I've been doing for 30 years, because I care about kids with disabilities, y'all. I'm very, very passionate about this. I want our kids to learn because I know they can learn. But what we're seeing over and over and over again is kids that can't learn. One of the things, and I don't think it was even brought up, I seen earlier today, was some KPIs about transition where this huge amount of kids supposedly are working or in post-secondary. Well, I can tell you, sitting on a lot of the OCDD, the Office of Citizens with Developmental Disabilities committees, we don't have a single district in this state that's got over 20% of people, kids with developmental disabilities, work, but they're at home with their mom and sitting on their sofa. That's where they are.
Well,
80% of them are
Can you
not
kind of
working.
wrap it up a little bit?
Okay.
As you-
So I want y'all to understand that, I believe that there is a problem still that we're not addressing, that we need to do this. It's critical that we get away from desk audits, and it's critical that we get away from self-monitoring especially, and really monitor what's really happening. Just to address what Mr. Harris said earlier, 91, we never had 91 monitors. That was never the case. That was 91 employees. That happened when Bobby Jindal took over, and when Bobby Jindal, we got us in trouble financially, and then John White came in, and they cut, I was part of that. They cut the special ed employees to save the regular ed employees on the back of saying that, well, regular ed serves special ed kids also, so we don't need all those other people. Well, what you did is you cut all the specialists, all the experts, all the people that districts, and if y'all remember when I was here in October, and I don't know if Dr. Doris Boyd is still here, not from from St. Bernard Parish, but she said it. We used to have 100 people, it seems like we could call up there for anything.
Okay.
She herself said, now I call and I can't even get them to answer my call. So anyway, we need to do something with this compliance monitoring because it's just not working the way it's supposed to be working.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Yes, sir. You last.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Chris Rowe. I'm a parent of 2 students with disabilities who attend public schools in New Orleans. I'm also the State Director of Policy for the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates. Can you hear me now? I'll try a little bit louder. I also am the Senior Director of Policy for the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, which is the nation's leading organization advocating on behalf of the civil and legal rights for students with disabilities. I'm also, another hat that I wear, I'm the co-chair of the Special Education Advisory Council for New Orleans Public Schools. So I have a pretty deep understanding of policy and regulations. I'm here today to really express concern about this latest report, especially on the backside of the report that came out last fall around the monitoring related to state complaints. I think together, those 2 reports paint a very troubling picture. I agree with a lot that's been said today, so I won't go through all of my prepared comments. I'd be happy to share those in writing with the board members. But I do want to point out a couple of things that are very troubling in our review of this particular report. The fact that the state cannot identify people that are actually working to support students with disabilities is a big red flag to us. I think the fact that the state gets a tremendous amount of money from the federal government, specifically with attestations about how those monies will be spent, and the fact that the state cannot account for those funds being directly used to support students with disabilities is very troubling, especially when I hear over and over again that we don't have money to pay for certain items that are very critical. One example is the budget for the state to monitor and enforce schools. This is a required element of the IDA funds that the state gets. When looking at how Louisiana spends its funds, it supports that at a fraction of the level of other states nationally. So Louisiana is spending about 1% annually on enforcement and monitoring. Nationally, about 10% of every state's dollars from the federal government go for monitoring and oversight. So that's one indication that we're not doing the job. I'm glad we're adding more positions. I think that's really needed. But that does give you an idea how we're definitely not supporting the kinds of things that we need to ensure that our students are getting the education that they deserve. The other thing that is troubling is around the shortened school days. This is a big issue nationally that we see in state after state. COPA at the present time is involved in litigation in the state of Oregon on this very particular issue. This has been something that has spurred the state to take action there to address this issue. So that is one of the states that I would encourage us to look at in terms of how do we solve this problem. I'm one of those parents that gets calls on a regular basis from my school. It's time to come pick up your child today. He's having a bad day. Can you come and pick him up? That is not legal. That is illegal. There's federal guidance that's been issued by OSEP, formal guidance about this particular issue, and I think we need to pay more attention to that. Then lastly, the issue of significant disproportionality around discipline. I'm sure every parent here will tell you of a child with disabilities. Our students get suspended, put in school suspension, expelled on a very, very high basis. I think the state needs to look much more closely at this issue of exclusionary discipline. It's a big problem nationally. So I'll leave my comments at that. I will say that COPA is here. We want to support the state in doing right by our students, and I'm happy to talk with any members or provide resources that our organization can to the state.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay.
One more thing that I forgot, and it's so
Real
important.
quick.
It's so important. We have a lot of new superintendents across the state. I live in Ascension Parish, and if you looked at just what the LDOE tells our districts, they may be under the impression that they don't have deficiencies. When I went to my new superintendent, Dr. Walker acted swiftly, which is amazing. I also want to point out that it took the LDOE a year to give documentation to the auditors, and that is very concerning.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Do we have any other? So we have, do you want to make?
No, I just want to say again, look, this is something for which we are trying to improve. We hear you. I'm thankful you're here. I'm also thankful for my team. Meredith and Angela, you guys are working to improve this daily along with other people, and so just want to acknowledge that as well, and we have a lot of work that we still have to do.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion to receive the legislative auditor report. Do we have any objections to that motion? No objections, the motion passes. Okay, next.
Your next item is on page 119, item 4.4, consideration of an update report regarding the K-12 Computer Science Standards Writing Committee progress and timeline. The recommendation is to receive.
Thank you. Do you want to?
Yeah, just briefly.
We
We
need
need a
sorry.
motion.
We need a motion. President Morris. I was looking at him a minute ago.
Second.
Mr. Harris, seconds. You look alike, a gray suit.
Everybody does. No, just an update for the board. So we have embarked on the state's first attempt to set computer science standards for the state of Louisiana by the different grade level bands. We are making progress on that. We have a series of meetings that still have to happen to work through that process. The committee is continuing to convene over the summer. Our intent is for sometime maybe late August or September to post those for public comment and public review, the work of the committee. After that, in October, September, October, we'll review them further as an agency, and then in October, we will bring those to you for your consideration. And then in the upcoming year, we'll provide training to school systems on the computer science standards. It's a pretty exciting time to do something that's never been done. So we're enjoying being a part of that. But I just wanted you all to have that report. And you also should have in your document the names of the work group members and the steering committee members. And you'll see that not only do we have educators and parents, but we have content area experts, which I think they'll produce a really good product.
Okay, any comments from anybody? All right, we have one person, Zandra Ashley, who wishes to speak. Oh, that was on the earlier one? Okay. Yeah, it just had the wrong number, that's all. We appreciate it, thank you. We'll change the number and put it down in the record. Okay,
Does she want to speak?
so do we have a motion and a second on, oh, you still want to speak? That's fine, come on down, we'll let you speak. You just had the wrong number in the card. That's no problem. I'll cut you off.
Don't do that. Okay, my name is Zandra Ashley. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a resident of Bossier Parish. I have a lot to say, but I don't have enough time. But parents are comfortable talking and sharing with families, helping families, because they are families helping families. Experts at this, and I don't see how anyone could or would even consider retaliating against that. I'm a mom of 3 children, 2 with disabilities, and parents would like to move from being in the audience to participants in these decisions and the implementations. We don't just need numbers. I know a lot of people talked about us needing more monitoring or involved with special education. But what we need are individuals who are dedicated to special education. You can put a lot of work into the wrong things, clearly. The missing component are often the parents and the students when meeting and deciding to make these changes in our schools. We aren't ensuring that everyone is dedicated to special education on local and state levels. I believe that everyone should be doing the same thing across the board. The main issue, if we all be honest, is that we're hiring warm bodies instead of individuals in special education who know what they're doing, who have the passion to do it, and who want to be educated in doing so. We need more people who aren't just going to see these behaviors as a problem, but understand that behavior is language. And clearly our schools are not speaking that language because our kids are screaming and no one is listening. And the response from individuals who are not educated, trained, or aware of what's going on is informal removals. Get rid of them. Do modified days. Shorten how long they're receiving or should receive an education, which does nothing but deny them FAPE. So we have to be realistic as a state, and we can't just run from the problems or the issues that we face. It's okay to get it wrong, because that's the only way we get it right. And if we're pretending that we're doing everything right and patting ourselves on the back, we will never turn in the right direction. COVID hit us hard, but we've continued to move forward in the wrong direction instead of stopping, pulling parents to the table, professionals to the table, communities to the table, and listening. That's what's missing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, well, back on the agenda then. Currently, we are considering an update report on K-12 computer science standards. Is there any objection to that? Hearing no objection, we'll move on to the next item.
Next item is on page 141, item 6.1, consideration of the summary of public comments and agency response concerning public comments received in reference to the April 20, 2024 Notice of Intent regarding Bulletin 1706, Regulations for Implementation of the Children with Exceptionalities Act. The recommendation is to receive the SPCAR, authorize Bessie staff to submit the summary report, and direct Bessie staff to proceed with the final adoption at the appropriate time.
Okay, Mr. Harris moves, and Dr. Armstrong seconds. I volunteer. Do we have any comments from?
Just if you need any information about that, Ashley Townsend at the table, what we recommend as explained in the packet.
Okay, we have one audience member, Catherine Hart, who's in support of the recommendation but does not wish to speak. Do you want to make any comments? Okay. Any questions, comments? Okay, anyone in opposition to the motion? No opposition, the motion carries.
And that concludes your agenda.